I'm not late. You're late. So my fault again. Like last week, I couldn't read questions right. This week, I can't be here. Dynasty Outhouse already let me know that he's going to be sick this week. Hello, 9 viewers. I'm really impressed you stuck around. I really appreciate it. And then just before we went live, one of my works called, and I had to go in. I knew what the problem was straight away, but obviously me being there meant I had to do all the work. And it took too long. And when I got back, Zach's gone. Maybe for good. I don't know. He's writing me right now. So I apologize for that. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to get through any questions that come up. If Zach can come back, that'll be awesome. If not, I'm just going to keep trying to do the best I can, which is almost always what I'm up to. But anyway, welcome back to the Dynasty Grind. Sorry if you missed it because you were here on time and I wasn't, and so on and so forth. But let's talk some Dynasty because, God, I need to distract myself at this point. Zach left. Dan, thanks for being here. And you were actually early, 9:05, which I was too, but then I had to leave. Let's see, 12-team Superflex, 10 start 10 PPR, Pickett and a 23-second. I'm assuming that's Kenny Pickett and Superflex. For some reason, I get him and Pickens mixed up. There's only one Pickett. Likely late to mid, or 23 first, likely late. Here's the thing. I don't play the mid to late likely stuff a year out. But assuming you've made a pretty good assessment of it, I'm going to let it lie. I think I just want the 23 first here. Yeah, I just take the first, mainly because it's more interesting to more people, and I can probably do more with it, and the value is more likely to increase in safety, and I don't have a lot of hope for Kenny Pickett. However, that's close enough. Like, the guy selling you Pickett here probably shouldn't be asking for the second shouldn't be in there. But I get it. I take the first side, but it's fairly even. Mayday, hey buddy, 12-team Superflex start 10. Traded Watson, Hollywood, and a 24 third for Goff, Sky Moore, and 23 first. Okay, yeah, I like that a lot. I'm probably on the first side, but I'm not a big Sky Moore fan. I'd much rather have Hollywood Brown, but the 2 first easily sway that side, especially to get out on Watson. I've seen a lot worse trades for Watson of late. So yeah, that's pretty good. Randy. Love you guys. Really appreciate that. Sorry I kicked Zach out by being too late. Russ wasn't feeling well today, so he was never going to be part of it. Do you guys have plans already for the Draft Expo in August? Can't speak for Russ and Zach. I know we're all planning to be there. As far as I know, that's all of our plans. We're not part of any of the exhibitions, stage performances, whatever they are. We don't have a booth, not part of a table. I might saunter up to the DLF booth while I'm there just to see if they know who I am, which they won't. But yeah, we're going to be there for sure. I haven't booked either a method of transport or a hotel yet, but I have tickets to go and time off work. So I'm going to be there one way or the other. Zach's already planning to be there. He was there last year, and so's Russ, who was also there last year. So those are our plans so far. Sean, give Brandon Cooks and Russell Gage, who's an interesting little under-talked about sleeper, actually. Get Akers. I have four RB and only have Diggs and Adams. Should I just keep the wide receivers or take the value? I'm not huge on Akers, but I got to expect he's more important here than either, especially Brandon Cooks at this stage. Not that he's not going to have another solid career, but I don't think we're getting any more years of value out of him. And Russell Gage is just a sleeper. So, yeah, probably just take Akers here, even though I have running backs. That just gives you a better ability to trade running backs away to players who need running backs at some point. That's what I'd say. Daniel McGrath, 10-team 1QB, start 9, 0.5 PPR, grade my trades. I'll try my best. I don't really have a grading system, but we'll just go with the standard A to D and F, I guess. I traded Devontae in a 24 first for A.J. Brown. Oh, yeah, I like that. yeah, that's an A. Traded Juju Haskins. I guess super flex for that league. No, okay, that's awesome then. And a 324 seconds for DJ Moore. I don't like that. I think DJ Moore and Juju have similar flaws. DJ Moore's definitely more certain in terms of his floor. Similar upside, and I think at this point, I'd rather bet in the variance of Juju getting back into the top 12 than DJ Moore finally cracking it. I don't think Baker Mayfield solves anything for him. I'm gonna call it a B because DJ Moore's a solid asset here. There's less risk. DJ Moore is a solid get. So I don't hate it. I'd probably rather keep Juju, but that's a solid B plus, maybe even an A minus. Wando Robinson and 24 third, they don't swing it for me, but I do like getting Wandell. There's upside there, and that puts it solidly in the B plus, A minus category. You're a competing team, so it makes sense to lock in that value and AJ Brown's upside. Yeah, I like that. I think he did fairly well. Randy, okay, I have an issue. Me too. Why do folks in our fine community think that Akers is totally healthy? Do they? It feels like if they thought he was totally healthy or totally what they thought he was going to be, he'd be like pumped up like Swift is right now. But okay. He was football healthy for the playoffs and Super Bowl, but there is no guarantee he's ever back to what he was. I don't know what he was. We thought he was going to be something, more than we've seen so far. I don't know. The fact that he could come back and play in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, and then he gets the off-season worth of rest, is probably why you're feeling like we're just considering him healthy. I haven't read anything that suggests he's more of an injury risk. As far as him being less than he was, I haven't read anything like that as well. I think Akers is more appropriately valued than many of the same running backs from his draft class, where we still see the upside, even though we've seen them be healthy in their jobs, which makes less sense to me, to be honest with you. But right now, I think his value is fairly decent. He's slightly outside the top 12, I think, which is fine for him. I think he's Antonio Gibson, kind of a value and player in 2022. AJ Brown and Kamara for Najee Harris. I kind of hate this trade. 1 QB. I want the Brown and Kamara side. I really like getting Harris, but this seems like way too much for him, to be honest with you, especially if the Brown and Kamara is going to a competing team. Brown and Kamara, like, easily, and I Najee Harris is, for me, who everyone else has Swift and Akers and Javonte Williams as. I'd rather have Harris and all those guys, not mainly, but in partly because he's less valued, easier to trade for. So I don't say that lightly, but I think this is easily the Brown Kamara side. For me, Tactical Assassin, don't give up. The PA Howdy signal was flashed over Kentucky. Yeah, I had to leave, and then Zach had to leave. So, Sean, Randy, I'm not certain Akers is back. That's why I'm leery to make the trade. Yeah, Sean feels similar to you do here. I'm not going to read your conversations back and forth. I try not to. Usually just beat it up, but this time probably just to keep it alive. Let me check. Now you get to hear dead space where you usually wouldn't, because this is where my co-hosts do the marvelous job of actually inserting interesting conversations. Let me see. Where's Akers? And remember, my collection of ranks and stuff is always going to be a little behind, just because I drag it from a month out. It's usually good enough. Let's see, Cam Akers, overall, his position rank is 17 once you average out Fantasy Pros, Underdog, and DLF ADP. When you're specifically looking across the platforms, he's running back 17 on Fantasy Pros, 13 in Dynasty, 18 in Underdog. So, yeah, this might be a Dynasty thing. We like him because we still think of him as a running back. And Dynasty is probably a little overvalued, but in terms of where he's being drafted overall for 2022, it's probably much more reasonable to think of him as a top 15 running back. So I think that's what Sean and Randy are catching hold of here. Akers could never get the explosiveness that he had. Yet we talk about him assuming perfect health. This seems to me like an area where injury might cover up. Not bad. but things that we often count before we see it. He was explosive and all this stuff, and the only reason we didn't see him become like a difference-making running back is because of the injury. Thing is, while he was on the team, he was always, because the team wants to run a second running back that catches passes. It's not that they won't throw to Cam Akers, whoever the RB1 is, but they've consistently shown a willingness and even a desire to have more of a committee than we would be comfortable with. That's what Akers had when he was healthy. So whether it's explosiveness or is back or not, I think running back 15 is a more reasonable expectation for him anyway, which is why I'm probably not feeling that he's too overvalued right now. It seems probably about right. What up, DLF chat? Appreciate that, Jan. Hey, Zach Linton. Traded Akers 2 mid to late 23 first for Jefferson all day. And he traded my 23 first back for Muth. That's fair. I think that's too much for Muth, but I recently gave it, so I can hardly point fingers. It was in a tight end premium though, and it's a long story. But this is Jefferson side fairly easily, and you even got your first back for a tight end, and that's awesome. Daniel McGrath, who would you choose between Pitts and Kelsey to start in the tight end spot? I've both rostered, and my team is rock solid that I can see myself flexing both weekly. Yeah, I feel pretty safe starting the best matchup with both of them on my roster. Honestly, I think they're both probably going to be top 5 tight ends and difference making in 2022. Who would I put in first? Kelsey. Just let me see that the Giants can get him touchdowns first before I start playing him over Kelsey. But Kelsey's going to be the first guy I start. Daniel McGrath, how about A-Rob this season? It's good value. I feel like he has pretty safe floor given the situation he landed in. If Cup went down, his ceiling would be massive. I think it's worth remembering how much hope we had for Robert Woods with Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and then Woods got slightly injured. This offense wants to have a dynamic offense that it can use its weapons alternately, so it can't be defended in one specific way, which is a bright idea. OBJ didn't quite work out for that little while they had him. Robert Woods got injured, what was working out before that. If Cooper Kupp isn't on that team, though, I want you to know, I don't think that's green lights for Allen Robinson. I think that team is significantly worse without Cooper Kupp. So I don't want Cooper Kupp to be gone. If Allen Robinson is capable of putting up performances like he has done previously in his career, it's going to be with Cooper Kupp. He should be able to do it with Cooper Kupp, which is why I think he's a value, especially as a potential return in 2022. AJ Brown and Kamara for Najee, or Higgins and Kamara for Najee. I don't want Najee in either of these deals. I wouldn't do either of those deals. If I was forced to do one of those deals, I'd sell Kamara. But both of those are too much, in my opinion, for Najee. And I love Najee, to be honest. Mark Andrews for Pitts. I feel like Andrews has reached his ceiling. I'm not sure he will be able to do that again. In Dynasty, it's also just a matter of ceiling. Pitts is being drafted above Andrews, and we haven't seen his Mark Andrews season yet, assuming he's going to have one. So I'd take Pitts for the upside, both value, and hope he can produce a similar season in points. Remember, last year had a great year, 1,000 yards, still only top 12, still only 11th overall, I think, in points. Mark Andrews has consistently shown that top 5 upside. And Baltimore's going to regress in passing as well, is the way I'd talk down Mark Andrews. But I want Pitts just for the upside here. And I don't know you can get a trade 1-to-1, but I definitely do it. Know what I mean? All right, traded 225 first and Devontae Smith for AJ Brown. 2 firsts, like 3 years out for Brown? Yeah, that's fine by me. And you also get a second back. I think that's awesome. Like, I try not to trade. Honestly, I try not to trade picks a year out from a year out. Like, I try not to trade 2024 picks right now. Not because it can't work, just because if I do that, then I'll never have any picks, to be honest. So I try and insulate somewhere. But honestly, with 25 picks and you're going, and AJ Brown, I think, is going to hit his upside again this year. And you're also getting an earlier 23rd. A 23rd second is probably valued at a 25 first right now for most people. So yeah, this seems like a walk-away win. Yeah, sorry, Zach. I know I'm coming to the where the hell is the show's comments probably. Where's the Dynasty Grind at? Sorry, Dan. Zach, yeah, 20-minute delay. It turned into, it was at least a 30 or 40-minute delay. Apologies again. Sorry, Joe. I apparently there weren't too many comments between that and me actually turning up. I was very late. I lied. Very late. I'm sorry. Wheeze, evening on. What do you think Cleveland's backfield looks like with Brissett and Watson if they split starts this year? I don't think they're going to split. I think it's going to be one or the other. I don't think Watson plays this year. Although trading Baker probably doesn't say anything about how confident they feel about him starting. At this point in redraft, I really don't think there's a point in drafting Watson, because if he only starts the last half of it, I don't think it pays off. As far as the backfield goes, Watson helps the team, and so the outlook is brighter with Watson on the team. But you know, Kamara and Chubb have been killing it while the team was worse, and I don't think Brissett's going to be any worse than Baker Mayfield over the last few years. In fact, I'm kind of more excited about Cleveland with Brissett as a more secure starter when and if Watson gets suspended for part of the year. Does that make sense? As it is, both are kind of sells in Dynasty, but if you can't get the value, they're fine starts for 2022, both Chubb and Hunt right now. So those are my thoughts on it. Traded a 23 first, a third, and a second, and 2 fourths. Sorry. Let me try again. Traded a 23 first, 3, a third, and 2 fourths for Dobbins and Gallup. And so it's a first for Dobbins and Gallup. Did I F up? No. No. No, you didn't. I would do this trade, especially if my team was halfway decent. There are a lot more ways of you losing this trade than the other guy can lose this trade. He's whoever got the first has got the safer floor, more insulated value increase, stuff like that. Gallup's difficult because I don't know when he starts or how healthy he is when he does, and he's got no draft capital to secure him after this year. Dobbins, though, Dobbins is solid. He's even got upside. So I think this is a fair trade. Adding the third and 2 fourths doesn't change it for me. It's pretty much just the first. Blitzberg, 12-team Superflex start 9. Would you send a 23 second for Baker or no interest in Baker? It's a Superflex, so you have to have some interest in backup quarterbacks all over the league. But I think that's where I'd put Baker Mayfield at this point. If he becomes a starter, I don't think that helps that team much. I don't think he rockets that team production up so far that he becomes more than just the filling guy for this year. Carolina's, I don't know what they're doing because their young stars are aging, and they've made no moves to get a better QB, and this is not a move for that. By the time you get a rookie and develop him, DJ Moore's career is not done, but we're well past the prime for Dynasty. And Christian McCaffrey, we're already questioning his value this year just because of the injuries. So I don't know what Carolina's up to, and I don't think Baker. I don't want to pay starter value for him. I'll pay Brissett money for him, basically, at this point. That's where I'm at, but I'm a QB dummy, so better late than never. That's what I was kind of hoping. Robert, what are your thoughts on Superflex leagues that start 3 wide receivers and 2 more flexes outside the Superflex spot? Major wide receiver bump? Yeah, I think it's not unknown, but I think it's one of the smaller ways that wide receiver can start dominating, especially over running back, as the dominant currency and also the dominant value and necessity in dynasty leagues. When you're starting 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs, and that's only if it's 2, it becomes much more heavily wide receiver, and the flex spots, wide receiver, yeah, it strongly leans the positional value back towards wide receiver, even if it's not already in a standard vanilla league. Start 10 Superflex. 10 team Superflex, start 9. Get it right, Pete. Half point PPR, tight end, 6-point passing. There's a tight end premium. 6-point passing touchdowns. Was offered Pitts and Tua for Murray. Contender, but it need to be a tight end upgrade. Can't bring myself to give up Murray. I don't blame you. This is on the fence for me because Murray's one of those quarterbacks where you really shouldn't give him up in Superflex. Pitts could be that dynasty asset to make it worth it, and Tua could be good. Unless Tua's absolutely terrible, he should be pretty decent this year. He could even be better than that if his rookie profile is still right. I keep Murray. I like the Pitts idea, but especially in a Superflex, and I already got one of those quarterbacks. No. Best place to get Pitts was the rookie draft, and this is paying too much. This is what you hope you can get if you have Pitts, and the reason to try and add him if anyone's a little uncertain. So no, I keep Murray. Everyone's here just to talk to Joe. That's what I believe. The chat was here. You all could have just talked to Joe. Russ, enjoy your grind. Some league mates feel like I won some trades during the rookie draft. I had the 101 and viewed it as a leverage in trades. Hard to trade now. How can I rebound with the mates? Sounds like more of a Dynasty House question. It depends. I feel like I'm missing some context here. That like you cheated people. Like it's not like you forced them, right? To make trades. I don't know how you rebound from that. You just try and be open and honest. You try to give people. I try and give and accept trades that help both teams ultimately. If they're unwilling to trade with you because you've won too many trades, it's really hard to get out of that, to be honest. If your league mates have decided, I know a lot of people who do what I do who feel like their league mates always feel like they're getting the raw end of the deal, even when he's giving them good value because they think he knows something they don't. I've never had that experience. But I don't think there's a way out of that. You just got to ride it and keep making honest trades that you honestly think are decent for both sides, but give both sides an edge. Hopefully you get the edge in either value or points. And hopefully some of the trades work out bad and you remind them of that maybe. How deep is the 23 draft? I don't know. I haven't even evaluated a single... Well, I've looked at one player from the class just because he happened to be on the team with 2 prospects from this year. And he looked pretty good. Calling back to the things Zach has said on the Dynasty Grind, you get at least 2/3 of the way through the first round before you start to slow down, especially in Superflex. I think in non-Superflex, it's fair to say there are 8 players who will be touted as top 5 this year. Just guessing from what Zach said here, literally. And if you go to Superflex, pretty much the first round, say the first 10 players should all be valued as like top 5 picks this year. But I'm guessing because I haven't evaluated the class yet. Hopefully when we get Zach back on here next week, I'll remember to ask him that, to reline that out. Him and Russ both have a better idea on the class. Also ask Travis May. Travis May on Twitter. He's deep into the Devi community. What would you need to get to move Baker in a 14-team Superflex? 14-team makes it interesting. Start 9, though. Rebuilding team. I almost any... Like, it's a 14-team, so I get it. But if I get offered a second-round pick, I guess high second-round pick, late first, because it's a 14-team. But still, high second-round pick, I'd be interested in moving Baker. Like I said, I'd probably value him more as a backup one-year starter kind of a deal right now. Alan Davis. Hello. Hello, Alan. Do you, Devi? Not really. Not at all, in fact. Rank your top 3 running backs and wide receivers in the 23 class. Sorry. I only know the one. It's a guy who played in Ohio and kicked the pants of both Olave and Wilson, and so like that's my number one because he's really the only guy I know. Jonas, is injury prone really a thing? I don't think so. Well, let me put it this way. I don't think it's a thing most of us can apply. There are actual doctors and physicians and physical therapists that are starting to capture, create, and calculate injury risks based on data and science and an understanding of things I just literally don't know well enough to do that with. So it's fair to say that some of those guys, Edwin Portis comes to mind, can actually start to talk about guys who are more or less likely to see reoccurrence of injuries. I think for the majority of us, especially the way that term is used, injury prone, it's never been a thing. Personally, that's my stats on it. If you lose power explosiveness from an AT tear after healing, then doesn't mean slower than make you prone to more injuries. No idea. There's been no proof, size measurements, athletic measurements, or even positional. Actually, it seems to be that running back is in some ways a safer position for things like concussions. I used to know a quote off by heart by a running quarterback who said it was actually safer to run as a quarterback because you could choose how you get hit as opposed to just being hit in the pocket while you're looking downfield, which means, you can't control how you're hit nearly as well. So I really think that our public understanding of injury risks and athleticism and even position is just wrong, to be honest. I don't delve into it much, but that's my understanding of it. Just discussing injury rate, so I feel free to skip, to be honest. 2025 class is stacked. I'll tell me about it in 2024. There I go again. 12-teamer, half-point PPR, Sky Moore and Jahan Doxson, or Chris Olave in a 23-second. I'd take Olave in the second. Both, I think Moore's a little overhyped. I think Doxson's a little undernoticed. Olave is fairly valued, and the 23-second, again, is just a little bit of insurance. And I have Olave ranked over both of them, so I would do that. I wouldn't trade you like the Olave pick and a second next year to get the 111 and the 112 this year, for example. Like, I wouldn't do that trade unless I was going down to get David Bell and Trey McBride a little too early. So, yeah, Olave in the second. I have to keep it up now since you mentioned it. There you go. Sorry, I'm listening in on y'all's conversation again. Smash that like button. Thank you, Freak Stomp. I would literally never think to say that. Really appreciate some of you coming back. Again, apologize for being late. That's why Zach isn't here. Russ isn't here because he wasn't feeling well. To be fair, that one's not my fault. So, Carolina took a corner over Justin Fields. Yeah, at this point, it feels like that was a mistake for both of them, doesn't it? Keith Coop, would you trade away Cook, Dalvin, I'm guessing, and Allen Robinson for Barkley? Yeah. Yeah, I would. And a young receiver. I would do that without the plus, but yes, I would. I want to move on from Cook, but get nervous to get rid of potential high. That's the thing. I wouldn't feel too nervous about Cook. I just honestly feel more secure. Cook's a top 5 running back, and he should be a top 5 running back. I feel like Barkley can be the running back 1 on like a difference-making season. That Barkley's just always got higher upside from most running backs outside of CMC. So I kind of lean that way. Allen Robinson's a really decent ad here. I think both sides, again, that's the kind of trade I like. Both sides are getting something that's pretty decent to give up the other thing for. But the Barkley side has a higher upside. And if you're throwing a young receiver in there as a gamble, that protects me against, not being on team old guy as much as usual with Allen Robinson. The rest of my team is young. Again, I don't think you have to panic on Cook, but I think this is good idea for a trade if this is what the kind of move you're considering. Peter, so can we expect basically 6 new wide receivers and 6 new running backs as fresh breakouts for the top 12? Yeah, no. Yeah, but no. All right. Since I'm by myself here, I can actually maybe pull out a chart or two. Let me see. What we're going to do is limit to the top 12. I don't know how well this is going to show up. But let me show you one of the things I'm working on to put in my database for everyone, if I can. It's a filterable table. Essentially, it's got breakout rates, repeat rates, and return rates by season, and you can filter by position rank as well. And this probably isn't going to work, but let me see. If we just go and look at the breakouts, which are right here, then what you can see is, on average, at wide receivers, we see about 5 new wide receivers break out. For running backs, we see about 5 in the top 12. So that's not quite 50%, you'll notice, because that would be 6, like you're saying. I like to say 50 just because it makes it nice and clean, but it's really closer to like between 40 and 41%, depending on which position you look at. But yeah, we should expect about 4 to 5, 3 to 6 actually is probably a fairer variation, breakouts into the top 12, as in people who have never had a top 12 season before having their first top 12 season. Now, what's interesting, while regression doesn't work quite this perfectly, if we look across a seasonal lens, you'll see that wide receiver has actually been really consistent the last 2 years. In fact, over the last 3 years, we've had not largely above expectation. We haven't had like 8 breakouts, but we've had exactly the average for, or slightly better in 2019. But we also know that looking back, you do have down years. So it's not like I'm predicting next year's a down year. But since we haven't seen any bad years for breakouts, or the number of breakouts on a yearly basis, you know they're going to happen sometime. And next year's a really good year because we've got young, promising wide receivers who are already broken out, plus a few repeats who are hopefully going to be healthy again this year. It seems more likely a year we're going to see fewer breakouts. Now, even in the down years, we see 3. If I go back through the numbers, I don't think we've seen a year where less than 3 wide receivers have broken out for the first time, finishing in the top 12 ever. So you should all expect probably at least 3. But, you know, history is not a roadmap to the future. It's just kind of a guide of things to expect. There will be, if we run the human simulation long enough, eventually you'll see a year where 0 breakouts happen. I'm not saying 3 is the ultimate floor, but it's the lowest we've seen. So it's a fair expectation between 3 and 6. And since we've been so on average, it could balloon up, it could balloon down, but based on the landscape of wide receiver, I'm expecting to come down a little bit this year. Whereas if you look at the running back breakouts, which column is this? This is the second one. Then we'll see we actually have a downturn the last few years. Like we've been slightly below average in terms of the number of breakouts. Remember, the average is about 5, between 3 and 5. And last year just created out. We saw repeats and returns and almost no breakouts. We still saw 2, I believe. So I think it's reasonable to expect that that's going to bounce up closer to the average, and we're going to see closer to 5 breakouts, which is the average on a year-to-year basis. So it's not like there's a hard and fast rule, but I do think there's at least a floor. We should expect to see at least 3 new players, and an average expectation is 4. 5 is actually pretty common at both positions. So yeah, what you say is a lot cleaner and works better on a podcast, but the truth, which is also why I suck everyone, no one likes my own podcast, but the truth is between 3 and 6. And I really think you can follow the yearly trend, see how it's been doing lately, and because you're watching the inflow of talent from one position to the other, by actually going and looking at the seasons. I'm everyone's problem, John. Don't worry about it. Let me see. Fiji. No, Phil. Sorry. My team is competing. Congrats, Phil. Second last year. Good job. Was just offered Jamar and a late 23 first for my Jonathan Taylor and Ayuk. Ooh, I can see why you would be really tempted with that, and why you'd mention that you're competing. I have Jefferson, and it's tempting to pair with J. Jeff and Chase, and my rebuild my running backs in 23. Thoughts? That's like the running back one. So I think this is a fair trade. If you disagree with what I say, I do not think it's a bad idea to go the other way, but I would. I think we're going to see a lot of turnover at running back lately. And while Jonathan Taylor is definitely going to be in the top 5 for the next 3 years, do not expect to trade Jonathan Taylor and then him to be bad and be like, whew, got out of that one quick. There's no reason to expect that. I think the running back 1, like last year, he's a running back 1, but it's like the worst running back 1 season we've seen in 4 years. You know what I mean? Not enough receptions to kind of have the ceiling of Barkley or of Chase or even Derrick Henry, the unicorn who does it without receptions. I would rather have Dalvin Cook. I'd rather have players that with that level of upside, JT's upside, but with more security in the receptions, even if I don't think they have a higher ceiling than JT, because I don't think Dalvin Cook does at this point. Having said that, again, he's going to be top 5. Don't panic on it. But if you're rolling out like 2 of the best wide receivers, not just 2 of the best wide receivers, but 2 incredibly young wide receivers in your wide receiver 1 and 2 spot, I think you have a significant edge, like having a top 5 running back. And this year, like we were just saying, I expect a lot of turnover at running back. And then I think we're going to get even more turnover at running back in 2023. I think we're going to see a few returns, Barkley, CMC this year, and a few breakouts. I think Breece Hall could surprise upside even on the Jets. I think even Kenneth Walker, I think we're going to see some more breakouts this year at running back, which means that those who have already done it are a little more unsecure than if I wasn't expecting that. Not that Jonathan Taylor's not going to fall behind any of those guys, but hopefully you see what I mean. So I don't think it's a bad year to buy into the idea of getting new running backs and securing already good wide receivers, especially when they're young, like Chase and Jefferson. Having said that, Chase and Jefferson are both overvalued in Dynasty because they are young. It's not like they're going to have a season like Cooper Kupp, which was a difference-making 10-year kind of level season. And that guy was old when he did it. So it doesn't increase their upside, but I do think they're going to have top 12 production next year and for years to come, and their value is good. And Brandon Ayuk is also really good, buy low kind of a guy right now, in my opinion. So I like this trade and I do it. But it's so even because JT should and does in this case move mountains. So I don't hate it at all. Either side of that trade you wanted to go to would be fine in my opinion. I would lean Jamar Chase just because I'm expecting a little more turmoil at running back. Not specifically because of JT, just because I think there's more running backs that are going to turn out to be more valued than they are right now. And I want to go try to get them. This is a good year to do that. I just overpaying my savviness evens it all out. There you go, man. I wish I had some savviness. Then people think I always win the trade, but really, I'm playing you handsomely. That's the best way. I wish I had those kind of people skills. I don't mind overpaying when I'm amassing so much capital and studs. Yeah, I'd never mind overpaying in a trade. I want to stand on as many hills as possible, but I increasingly try and take as few stances as possible. Like I want to have very few stances and go all in on them. I've learned that having too many in doing that means even when you're right, you're wrong, because you didn't get enough of them right on the right roster. So it's fair to play towards the average most of the time. And that's what I try to do. But I definitely don't fear it. All right, you got to take your stands. Otherwise, what are we doing here? It's got to be fun. You've got to make your calls. I overpay too, especially when I like the manager. That's overpaying for a nice reason though. I overpay probably for different and inefficient reasons. That's fair. In a 16-man 1 QB league, how differently should I value 23 first-round picks, more or less than other leagues? That's a good point. And again, it goes back to the depths of the 23 class, especially, and honestly, I think I have a good opinion for this because I don't have an opinion on the 23 class yet. And I think most people should play it blind until we're there. Let me see. In a 16-team 1 QB league, well, the fact that it's 16 teams means that a lot of those first-round picks are going to be less valuable than general advice on what first-round picks are going to be. But 23 is likely to bring superflex value, which doesn't matter in a 1 QB. So in a 16-team league, that does significantly shrink the hype around 2023, in my opinion. Especially since you could trade for a first, and despite expectation, it could end up being basically a mid-second round pick compared to most value charts that you're going to see. So I think you should definitely adjust for it because of the size of your league. There's a little less hype around the majority even of first-round picks for 2023. But the thing is, even if it's not there in your league yet, the hype around the 23 class, if it hasn't reached your league mates, I think it's going to. There are too many people who are very good, and so I generally trust them. that are going to say too many great things about too many of these good players. And some are going to decide to go back to school because it's such a great class, frankly. And some people are going to point out, we always do this and rookies don't score points, because they don't, which is why we like rookie seasons that are overvalued, rookie years that are overvalued, because there's more you can do with that. So right now, because I don't think it's reasonable to have a large expectation on who is even in the class, what I'm buying into when I target 23 picks is that the smartest people I know on rookie evaluation that are in Devi are already telling me that there's real talent there, like a lot of high-end deep talent. And the other part is I know the value is going to grow. This is like the Elijah Moore take, which finally paid off at Zach Reed last week, where not only did his value drop after the draft, it's now sunk even lower because of Garrett Wilson and Jets talk. It's, it's going to happen, and so you try and get ahead of the curve. And that's what I'd say about 2023. Even in a 16-man league, I think those picks are going to increase in value, and I think 23 is kind of going to blow your mind by the time we get there about what you can get for it, even if it's a mid first-round pick. I would say because it's a 16 team, you should adjust down towards the general hype right now. Say you value I don't know, what's the scale here? How should you adjust? Don't trade young players that you actually think are good. For example, Rashad Bateman, I'd trade him for a 23 first right now in a standard league. That I would say that's fair value. But in a 16-team league, I would say the first needs to add more for Rashad Bateman. Now, if it's an older player, even though I think they're likely to score points this year, who might be worth a first? Let's try and Keenan Allen. I think that's still fair even in a 16-team league because there's added risk to the age column. If you see how I'm trying to balance it, I can't offer an exact scale, but that's the way I would do it. And because there are more picks that are first that aren't going to be first, and because it's one QB, that depth is significantly shrunk. I would adjust down somewhat. I would try and put more safety on my side. Specifically, one measure, like I was just doing, was by adjusting through the age, but you could also adjust by whether they've proven themselves to be a certain level of production yet, or they have not. And it doesn't have to just be age. But I would try and put more safety on my side when trying to trade for 23 capital because of that extra variance, because of the size of your league. Yeah. Well, yeah, I do overpay certain GMs because I know they have no bargain or rebuttal in them. I think that's a move as well, though, right? Like Dynasty Outhouse will say that, and also that's the way Zach plays. He'll say yes or no. And John Bosch, there's no point in sending him an offer that you think's on the bottom end of what you'd pay, because he's going to say yes or he's going to say no. And the more trades you send, the more likely he is to say no. So you're best going in with what you pretty much expect to be your best offer. And he'll say yes or he'll say no, and then you know where you are. And you're not going to antagonize him and make him reject trades that otherwise he would accept. And it's the same with Zach. Like, Zach doesn't do the haggle back and forth. So there's no point in sending Zach a trade that he might say yes to. Either I think he will, and I think this is pretty much as I'll pay, or it's not. And there's no point also with Zach, as he's mentioned on here, there's no point adding seconds and thirds like they make up value. He doesn't care. It's got to come full. People, especially FF managers, are leaving good working relationships with trade partners. Try and open them up as much as possible. But again, this is one of the areas I suck at. I'm not good with people, you may have noticed. Definitely not good at building relationships. And I'm just a concentrated ball of hate, as I said on Twitter today. And sometimes it spills out. But again, I think that's partly why Russ's main interest is trades. He's good with people. Everyone likes Russ. You don't have to talk to him long before you immediately like him. He's a genuinely nice person. He's easy to like. I'm not. But especially with trades, I definitely think you should trade partners. You should work towards being more like Leo and more like Russ than not, because they are easy to work with and you want to trade with them and you want to talk to them. Well, Joe, that's because you're awesome too. Yeah, John is also the most prolific trader. I feel like I'm listening in on your conversation, though, at this point, so I'm going to move on a little bit. I can listen to Peter talk about the hit rates all day. Yeah, that's definitely not because of my voice, so I'm glad you're interested in hit rates. Again, I try and move away from what I think of as hit rates these days. Again, where I look at the range, because hit rates are so myopic in the way they look at it, draft round hit rates and so forth. But I do think it's interesting to see, because you can see talent wave in and wave out of the NFL and in and out of seasons. And I think that's the pattern of progression, the way everything moves towards a mean eventually, and kind of shows up. So you didn't answer the second part. Haha. Did I not? For new running back breakouts, what traits or data points do they need to have before breaking out? That's interesting. And I wrote all this up for DLF. I guess I could read some of that out, or instead just look at my table. I don't know off the top of my head. I did find that initially I thought that running back production didn't matter as much. Like you could break out from nowhere a little bit more. And there is a slight or less signal of having a previous top 36 season, or a points per game, or even an overall points season previously, but it's not as strong as I thought. So for example, let me see. Let's look at top 12 breakouts. Like 50 to 60% of players have crossed what threshold? This is like a 9 points per game threshold if they've played over 8 games, obviously. So that's a decent one. And also having a top 36 season does make you more likely. So I retracted my Cam Akers better than DeAndre Swift kind of an idea. I see running backs was a little more difficult. I just learned, because they break out so much earlier, there's less production history before they happen. That's one interesting thing or something I found interesting, because you're more likely to break out year 1, let alone in year 2, that by the time you have a signal to trace, they've either happened or they haven't. And I thought that was an interesting element of running backs as well. Let's see, what else did I say in here? Top 12, what do we know? Yeah, I went over the trend I've already gone over with you guys a million times. Most common breakouts, draft capital. Then I look at the trend based on draft value. Yeah, I really didn't highlight like indicators the same way as I did at wide receiver, because it's a little bit difficult where we got those earlier breakouts. So I looked at career year again, especially if they're entering their second career year. Like that's a year, right? Having had a previous top 36 season and produced at least one season over 9 to 10 points per game. At some level of production threshold is actually pretty decent. That was about it. The thing I would say about running back breakouts is if you're expecting them to break out, you're expecting them to get more volume. Now, if they've already established themselves as a running back 1, that's when I think they're less likely to do it. Now, this is why I was kind of out on Antonio Gibson last year, and he sure showed me he got in the top 12. But the thing is, his workload did increase, but he already had basically the same workload as he had in year 1. J.D. McKissick was out, and so he got a lot more of the receptions. Running backs, once they get the job, and this is true of wide receivers too, but since it's so early, look at Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams is most likely to breakout candidate for next year, and I actually like the fact Melvin Gordon was there to hold him back last year, because if he'd had the job and hadn't worked into it, then I would worry. Now, a counterpoint to that is like CEH this year. He's had the job and hasn't broken out, so I think he's less likely. But I do think he's adjusted for by his ADP to think it's worthwhile. Same with Miles Sanders. So I'm much more interested in an A.J. Dillon than a Miles Sanders in terms of their breakout potential. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's in his 3rd year, is more interesting than Miles Sanders. You see what I mean? I'm more interested in running backs that haven't quite had the workload yet, but we think they're going to, than I am players who've had the workload who might suddenly have even more of the workload. I think players establish their role on a team earlier than we generally want to accept. So I don't actually think I kept the volume thing in here, because I did look at the average stat of like expected points per game before they broke out, and also expected points, but I think I took it out of here, so I can't read it off the top of my head. But that's basically the way I'm tracking who's more likely to break out. It's, again, career year, and a lower and less militant level of production before they actually break out. My team is competing. I think I went through this again, Phil. I'm real sorry. I was so late. You probably left before I even got near it. There we go. We're back to the start. Yeah, watching and listening to YouTube while NFL Network is on and looking at my team excessively has made my ADD flare up. Yeah, sorry, dude. Appreciate you watching. I didn't say it. Joe. I swear I see you in all the pods I watch in the chat. Yeah, I see Joe everywhere too. Like, honestly, are you really even doing anything if Joe's not in the chat? Honestly, that's how I know this is still worth doing. I have 323 firsts. All of my teams who missed the playoffs last year are going to be that improved by all accounts. I'm stacking back-to-back championships. What's next? Triple? I mean, why not just keep winning at that point? I really think that's missed in Dynasty. It's not about building a Dynasty team. It's about continually changing and investing in value as well as having a competitive team. That's the Dynasty aspect of this. Playing seasonally, but also you're able to rejig your roster as you need to for the following season. And sometimes it's not going to work, but you need to not fall out so bad that you have to rebuild. Rebuilding is sometimes just necessary. You can also play in a way that demands you rebuild regularly. That up and down variety is a great way to play Dynasty as well. I tend towards more stable, but I don't think it's necessary because it's better. I just think it's because of my nature, maybe. We don't have any smart analysis around here, Joe, but I try my best to make it sound smart. Let's see. Is it really Wesley's birthday? Is it really Joe's birthday? Happy birthday. That's awesome. Is Aaron Rodgers' new ink? I saw that. Not my style, obviously, but I really did kind of like the work. It made me think that's why all my tattoos don't look great, because you have to go to like a really expensive tattoo artist. The lines on that were clean. You know what I mean? The artist said did some good work, even if it's not my style. Anyway, so what was a funny question? What we should be buying low on Jordan Love? Asking for a friend. That's fair. No, Jordan Love's not going to be a thing. I think if Aaron Rodgers is done, it's going to be a while before Green Bay is back on top. Let's put it that way. Having said, I have lower expectations for Aaron Rodgers this year, but unless he quits, and he could, it's not like he needs football anymore, and he gets a lot of hassle. So I could see him walking away, but I don't know when Tom Brady's going to retire, let alone Aaron Rodgers. So while I have lower expectations, like top 12 instead of top 5 for Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't mean I don't think in 2023 he couldn't bounce back up. If they find either this year or in the draft or in a trade a player who can consolidate more of that production for him, do the part of that job that is the receivers as much as Aaron Rodgers can make up for the deficits of some receivers, and then he could easily bounce right back up again, even if he did have a lower outcome in 2023. I know that's taking a very fun question way too seriously, but that's what I do. But I also like channels that don't have big followings but have good arguments too. Is that what you're saying with small time? I get it, Joe. It's fine. You're going out? Awesome, man. Hope you have a good time. I hate people but love trading. I like people in theory. Like, honestly, I generally am fascinated and I'm empathetic, and I think people are great. I'm an angry ball of hate, and just leave me alone. At the same time, it's conflicting, but mostly as long as we, talk to each other when we want to, like in trades, instead of being forced to talk to each other, it goes well. Everyone's wishing Joe a happy birthday. Everyone wish Joe a happy birthday if you haven't already, by the way. That would be an awesome thing to do. Ron T, would you take a trade for Elijah Moore? Like, I want Elijah Moore, so yes, I would. See him. Cole Commit, I like. 23 second, why not? Give up Cortland Sutton and TJ Hawkinson. Ooh, that's rough. Elephant one bite at a time. I want Cortland Sutton over Elijah Moore. I just think the potential for more upside is there. Elijah Moore's safer, and I really like Elijah Moore. Like Zach Reed said, he's on the Elijah Moore train, but he's also on the Sutton train. So let me try the next bite. Commit or TJ Hawkinson? Hawkinson? Is commit only 1 second away from TJ Hawkinson? Probably not. So this I want the Sutton and Hawkinson side. So I would keep the players you actually have right now. I don't think they're given enough value. If they change that second to a first, definitely I would say it's even at least. That's where I would say it was even. And then I decide, do I want the upside of Russell Wilson with Sutton, or do I want the value and perfectly viable top 24 player that Elijah Moore is? That's where the line is for me, I think. As it currently is, I'd take the Sutton and Hawkinson side, or keep Sutton and Hawkinson in this case. Sorry, I'm just reading your private message. Well, not private, public messages to each other here, but I'm trying not to start reading them. I will find another thing to talk to you about, don't you worry. I came in and the first thing I heard was Joe Sanchez was in every chat. I agree. Kyle, we all do. And it's, like I said, there wouldn't really be a chat if they didn't have Joe in them. The real question is, why do people keep doing videos and live streams if they don't have Joe in their chat? That's the mystery I think we need to get to the bottom of. I don't do astronomy, that's for sure. I'm more draft centric as well, Peter. Not big on trading as it means. I want to get better at trading because, I mean, most of play happens after the startup draft in Dynasty, and trading is your main way of changing a roster outside of the rookie draft, which is why I heavily focus my rookie process. And also, I've developed a pretty good waiver wire process, or at least I think it is, in that you'd rather go all in earlier than later, because it's essentially FOMO that keeps us hanging on to a little bit of money, because maybe there's a David Johnson further down the line. And normally there isn't. Thank you, everyone. Getting here late. I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of you, fantasy. Imagine coming to the Dynasty Grind late. So late that your co-hosts aren't able to be here, for example. Now you good. I was the late one today. Completed a trade in my 10-team half PPR Dynasty startup draft. Traded the 106, the 10.6, and a 23 fourth, and received the 3rd, the 7th, the 8th. Picking the 3rd, the 7th, and the 8th, essentially, and getting the 23 first. I think this is a really good move to do this year. I don't like moving out of the stud range of the 1.6. Did you say this is a super flex? Because if so, that's definitely a stud range. But this is a year to try and bimodal it. You want to go up and you want to go down, and you want future capital. So I think that's exactly the move you do in a startup this year. Yeah, like a lot. Ryan, would you send JT for Brees? Garrett Wilson and a 23. Yeah, I would. I think JT's finish is higher. Don't get me wrong, than Brees Hall. Brees Hall will be lucky to be a top 15 running back this year. It's the Jets. But I think Hall has top 12 upside. It's easily the only prospect that will be like the top two running back most classes from this year's class. Garrett Wilson, I think, could really be solid in this league, and you're getting that future capital. Yeah, I think this is a kind of very difficult, gut-wrenching move because it's Jonathan Taylor. You should be able to get anything you want. So if you don't like it, do a different trade with things that you want. But I think this is a kind of thing I'm trying to do. And it feels like to the other guy that they're getting a lot of value here, Jonathan Taylor, so they're more likely to do it. I hate it. It would make me feel terrible. And it's gonna suck watching Jonathan Taylor be great again this year. But I think I do those kind of trades. Those are the kind of trades, if I have done Taylor, that I'm trying to do. Same. I was looking throughout my Dynasty portfolio. My two most rostered players are Jermichael Hasty and Mo Alley Cox. Who are yours? Good question. I was looking at this recently the other day. I've been trying to do better at my rostership because, it's easier to have a high rostership of those low round players that you can just grab at any point after, round 15 or so. And that used to be who was mainly my most rostered players. And I've made a concerted effort to try and make it the players I have strong opinions on rather than players that, yeah, sure, I'll take them. You know what I mean? I was talking about this on Crossroads last night or the other day. I don't know. I forget when I do things now. Sorry, I got to select my leagues. So, see if I can do this again. My highest rusted players now, like across all positions. Oh, sorry. Jacob Harris, which I don't have a strong opinion on, so I'm not succeeding here clearly. Garrett Patterson, who is just an easy ad for me. Like Keontae Ingram, who I have a stronger opinion on. Kendrick Bourne, very strong opinion on, to be honest. Marcus Callaway, I specifically went out and made trades after doing that episode of Dynasty Crossroads. Zach Pascal, Evan Ingram, Giovanni Bernard, Jeffrey Wilson, he's just someone I've fallen into, and then Justin Jefferson. Again, it's not there yet, but I've really put a lot of work in, well, some work, as much as Dynasty is work, and to try and increase my rostership being the majority of players I have strong opinions on. Like Giovanni Bernard, just for life, man, so I'm always going to have a high rostership for him. Rondell Moore, I'm at 50%. Again, because I've actually been saying that, so my rostership should reflect it. It's hard to do because you kind of have to pay up to make sure the rostership increases, which is a weird motivation for making a trade. But I've been trying to because it's important to me. So, who else was I looking at this? Yeah, like Bourne, Callaway, Moore, Tim Patrick, and Juju Smith-Schuster. Those are the guys that I push the most often, and then the top of the fold rostership at wide receiver. You know what I mean? I do try to practice what I preach, but I'm trying to successfully practice what I preach more often. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. Yeah. Like the fact I have very few tight ends I have more than one share of, that kind of fits what I say as well. Anyway. Good question. That's Dynasty Planet, by the way, not sponsored. I've talked to the guy who does it once or twice, but it's a really cool website. You can log into your MFL, or I think he's also got Sleeper hooked up. You just use your Sleeper login for free and tell it which leagues to go and look at, and you can look at it calculates your rostership for you, which is really neat as a little free tool. It also does some other free tools that I've noticed, like player status check, rookie ADP. It's got a rookie ADP tab. Don't know what lineup means, but it's got a tool called lineup. I only have two teams, so I might have Tyreek Hill. That's a little easy to figure out. I like that energy, though. Derek Bateman. Any relation? 10-team Superflex. Would you trade 224 first for Jalen Hurts? In a Superflex, yeah, I would. Yeah, I honestly think, unless he really bombs this season, I think Hurts is a starter. They aren't just waiting till they build a team to go get that guy. I mean, they're leaving that option open for themselves smartly. I think Hurts is a top 5 QB again this season. I think they're pretty happy with it. I think the receivers he's got now are actually going to help him out a lot. So I don't mind giving up 2 firsts for a really good quarterback. Is pretty decent value in a Superflex, and I think you can get it on Hurts because people are still a little unsure, and I think he's proven at this point, so I'll go all in. QB dummy, don't forget, but that's where I'm at. Yeah, Pierre Strong, 50%. Again, unfortunately, that's one of the he's easy to get. He's the guy left on the board in the 3rd round once all the guys I really, really want, they weren't in some draft that I wasn't able to trade up for. But yeah, he's been a really easy ad. Like, again, but he's someone I'm just falling into. It makes sense in landing spot. He did stuff in college that was fine. I can't say I have a strong opinion on him. Unfortunately, my rostership isn't perfect yet. No Daniel Bellinger exposure. Makes me sad. Sorry, yeah, no. My most rostered T. Higgins and AJ Dillon. That's good. I mean, again, that's what I wish my rostership was. It was just, purely the players I like the best. Now, where I do try and play a value game, it's never going to work out perfectly. I'm going to get Pierre Strongs, and I'm not going to feel bad about it. But I do want it to look more like this, where, a lot of my highest rostered players are those that I have the strongest feelings and opinions on. I think that's a more fun way to play it. For me, those who are top 6 of my 13 leagues, like Peter was mentioning, I'm reading about myself here, they're just too easy to acquire. Yeah, and that's, again, especially like I've got probably 6 Dynasty leagues right now. One of them's a contract league, so it doesn't really count. And I find that to be a nice number. I always want to add, but I never quite do, if you know what I mean. And if I start adding, then I start finding it difficult to keep up with the waiver wire. But I think I found my sweet spot. But yeah, it's too easy to have a high rostership of some, like Marcus Callaway. I actually had to go out and trade for him because I wasn't drafting him back when. So the players who are easy to acquire, I want to make the players who I am most interested to acquire that are of that low value, though. So it should be better. Like, I should be able to turn more of that Pierre Strong into County Ingram, for example. Similar value, just because I missed out on them. I should be able to turn out. I'm not going to get anything on Andy Isabella. Let's see, who have I got here? I have diminished my Marcus Brown exposure, by the way. Just because he's normally the guy I have him value to try and do this with. Because no one values him until you start trading him away for, pieces. I went out, I tried to make Devontae Smith a thing. Like, I put it out on Twitter and said, who should I try and increase my rostership for? And I was only able to grab 1 share of him so far, believe it or not. So he's sitting down here at 16%. But I am trying to make the effort. One, because you have to get better at trades if you honestly have a goal, and 2, because you gotta set yourself achievable goals. I can't set myself a goal of winning every league, even though that's a goal. Because let's face it, I'm not going to win every league. I'm not that good, not that smart, and I'm playing against good, smart people. Not going to happen. Plus variance. But I can set myself the goal of making sure that the most rostered players on my team are the ones I feel strongly about. That seemed like a nicely succinct. It doesn't say the best players or don't have to hit, but the ones I have the strongest opinion on should be my higher rostered players. I'm not quite there yet, but it's getting better. Or it's getting closer to that goal. How many teams does everyone run? Again, I'm currently running, let's see, 66% is 4 teams. I'm pretty sure I'm in 6 Dynasty leagues. One's a contract. Let's see, I can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I'm in 6. 7 sounds like a nicer, luckier number, doesn't it? Nah. John's in 2. I'm counting 3 salary cap contract leagues in those 13 Dynasty leagues. So you're good, Peter. Yeah, I'm including the salary cap leagues. I don't know how I'd weed it out, but it does feel like a different kind of animal. Yeah, all those leagues are Dynasty. The only redraft leagues I'm in are like the Eliminator leagues for Superflex, for Scott Fishbowl to raise money through John Bosch's management. And also Scott Fishbowl itself. Maybe I should have more redraft leagues. Maybe that's how I can do it. You were talking about having more conviction in fantasy football. It's not that I have a lot of conviction, you might have noticed, before I read the second part of this. It's more like I have this conviction and then I go into my league and I don't find the value from my league mate that I think I should. And I'm like, well, I can't give it too much value. I've stopped trying to do that second part. It's a whole being willing to overpay, being willing to sell too low as well. Like, you can't trade Marcus Brown if you have a decent and honest opinion of him. His value is too low. But if I want to make some moves, I'm going to have to accept that someone's not going to value Marcus Brown the way I think they should, or the way I do. And I'm going to have to accept that someone values Rondo more than ADP says they should. And so I've essentially trying to stop that second part of not wanting to be cheated. Like, I have this conviction, even if I think the market is telling me that I should get better, that doesn't matter. Like, I've got to increase the shares of my conviction, come what may, within reason, league mates. Scott Connor talks about that too. Can you talk about that? Well, I guess I just did. Yeah, like my convictions are very strong. I know exactly what I think is going to happen, and I think I hit at a pretty high rate. Like, I'm pretty self-deprecating, and I call myself out when I'm wrong a lot. I think last year I did way too... I can't expect to do as well as I did last year, reasonably. But I think I do hit pretty well. So I feel increasingly confident in my convictions. What I lack... I say it's trades, but it's not just trades. It's that second part of trades. It's, I think Rondon Moore is a really decent should-bust candidate to trade for, just because there are, like, he hadn't played football in 2 years. He had more than 200 routes. He ran more than 1.6. All of those things put him in with the best of the sleepers this year. And ADP says he should be falling in value, so people should be willing to trade him. Instead, I find people like, I might trade him for a second. So typically I've been like, well, screw you. If you're not going to sell a falling asset that should bust, I'm not going to add. Instead, I'm trying to let them have their cake. You know, if you want out, I'll add whatever it is that'll stop you feeling like you're, whatever it is that's stopping you do that. And it's worked to a certain extent. Like I say, I'm much happier with the way it looks right now. I'm Rondon Moore, as an example, 50% of leagues. Same as Justin Jefferson. All rookie picks, by the way, because I'm awesome. No, I just got lucky when my rookie pick was that year, obviously. Callaway, I specifically, I recorded that Crossroads show and the YouTube video mentioning him as someone I don't hear anyone about, agreeing that his season wasn't good enough to make him a good breakout candidate, but the fact that no one mentions him, and he had a 600-yard season, and everyone wants to argue about the efficiency of whoever it was, Deontay Harris on New Orleans, and the fact, if you expect MT not to be there, he's the lead 17% target share guy. And then I went out and I sent offers that I felt pretty confident would be accepted, and he was my second highest rostered wide receiver overnight. So even though I think he should be free, I was willing to give up. I think I gave him a second at most for some of those trades, which is way too much. But again, I'm trying to stop that part of me that says only if you get the cheapest possible value. That's probably as much as I can talk about it right now, unless there is a specific question. Do you play any best ball? Yeah, I do. I love playing on Underdog, not because I don't track my results. I don't track the data. I use Underdog ADP just for an insight into redraft or upside kind of plays. One of my dynasty leagues is actually a best ball league. It's one of my favorite because there are just sharp people in there, and I get my butt kicked a lot, but I learn a lot. I like it. So I like best ball a lot, and I love playing cheap. And I'll put them out on Twitter as well, not because I'm going to win everyone's money, but because it's fun. And you get to do a draft. The draft is the favorite part for everyone. So I play a lot of redraft best balls, and I've got one dynasty league that's a best ball. I'd be willing to add more. I've got two leagues that run as best balls because Kaleidoscope does as well. That's an interesting and weird league. So I've got two best ball dynasty leagues, and I do a lot of $3 best ball leagues just to have fun drafting. You only run 4 teams. I think especially if you're running high stakes teams like you are, Joe, that's probably a much better number than 7. Some people would probably operate better at 20, even in high stakes, to be fair. But I like to be able to think about stuff. And if you're trying to process everything too quick, like just a waiver wire, the number of little clicks you have to do to make a waiver wire move, and then you have to do it for every league. Once it gets beyond 6, I'm like, this is too much, even in low stakes. So I think that's a fairly good plan. And everyone has a different limit. It's not about how smart you are, how much you can do, or how much of a dynasty grinder you are. It's a random number for everyone where they feel like they have the most fun with the right amount of effort. And everyone's got a different number. And you should play with it. If it's too much, cut down. If it's not enough, increase it. Everyone's got a different number. I run 1, but 52 roster. I get like another way to play around with that. How much dynasty do you want to be doing, right? No, I like that. I prefer more vanilla leagues anyway, but yeah, that Kaleidoscope league that I'm in, like it's a standard vanilla league, but through some nuance of the way it's built, it's got like several hundred teams in it. It's really interesting. John Bosch comes up with some interesting ideas, I gotta tell you. Oh, that's not a good bad policy. If I win one, I'll add another because it pays for itself. I don't mind that. 3 is my limit. It's a good number. Trying to get on one with my YouTube peeps. Yeah, I keep thinking I want one with my Discord or my Patreons a little bit, but I'm not a commissioner. You know what I mean? We can still work it out, but I have to sit down and think about that one day. But we could probably get. No, we got time before the season. Maybe this year. Think you skipped my question by mistake. Did I? I apologize, Ron. Let me see if I can find it. Traylon Burks and a 23 third for Rashad Bateman and the Green Bay depth running back, Tyrion Davis Price. Which side wins? I think it's a fairly good trade, to be honest. I think Bateman should produce more this year, but I think Burks' value, if he does anything good, should be higher than Bateman by the end of the year. So you've got a nice seesaw balance going here. Davis, Price, and the third, and neither of those move the needle much for me. So this is pretty much Burks for Bateman. By the end of this year, I think you'd rather. I expect that you'd rather have Burks. This is going to be a rough year for rookies, but I'm going to stick by that. So I think the Burks side, but the Bateman side's a lot safer, so it's fairly even. But I'm going to say the Burks side, just to be clear. Good trade. All trades should feel like a seesaw like that. If you don't feel conflicted, then right or wrong, one side's probably, unless the other side's making a great move that me or whoever's evaluating it doesn't see coming. There's probably been some trickery. I like trades that seem to have something for either side. Be convicted on process and strategy. You see, that's the thing. I've got very strong convictions in that area, while trying to allow the space that I'm at least 45 to 50% wrong, or even 55, 60% wrong some seasons, and that other people should and could, should and shall, and should be encouraged to hunt their own process, right? I'm lividly virulent about what I think should be my process, while at the same time expecting everyone else should have their own and it should differ from mine. But I am very I do have convictions about how I should play. And it's about executing that in trades, essentially. Again, that's why I say I'm weak on trades. It's not like I can't talk to people. I don't send out trade offers, or I don't know what value is. It's getting what I want done reasonably close to value, or just giving up on value and getting it done, I struggle with. I give you an example. Like right now, the best piece I have to trade in the DLF Pods League is CD Lamb. I know I am the highest on CD Lamb, but the players I want to add for this season are all valued below him, probably for most people in that league, which means that instead of just holding CD Lamb so that I can go, CD Lamb did good and you all will lower on him than me, what I should do is accept a lower value and trade him for the pieces that I want this year. I so far have not done that. I have bugged people in their DMs, like, would you be interested in this kind of trade? And most of the answers are yes. Like, I asked Russ. Russ has got Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is very below CD Lamb. I asked Russ, do you think that's fair? And he said yes. Now, that's not saying he'll give me the exact trade he wants, but it means I should be able to trade CD Lamb to him for Deontay Johnson, who I think is slightly undervalued as well, at least as a potential repeat, and get a plus that can help me out somewhere else. I should probably do that trade, but I don't want to because I'm the highest on CD Lamb. I haven't been able to think my way outside of that little box I've built myself for, but it's an example of how I'm not making moves that I want to make for this year because I want to hold this position. And no, that's an example of the thing I think I need to get better at in trades. I can't get out of this little, I just want to keep CD Lamb box. There you go. 2 Dynasty and 1 3-player Keeper Leagues. Keeper Leagues are fun too, man. Whatever anyone enjoys, obviously. And I'm not saying like, Pat, you enjoy your little thing. Easily as challenging as every other format. And I've helped other people out with keeper trades. It's really interesting how you can have a process for how to decide to keep players. I actually find them fascinating. So, sorry, I didn't mean to get into that. Let me see. Same to everyone else. New York C 86718, who's been I asked a few questions and I didn't read the name. It says, good luck this year, man. Hope you win some cash on Underdog. I don't know if that's directly to me or someone particularly in the chat. I'm going to take it as it is to me and share it with the rest of the group. I hope we all win some money. Did I win money last year? I don't, again, where I don't track it. I put about $20 in, and I've had $120 to spend in leagues this year. But I will say I've noticed Underdog started giving me like $10 here and there because I send out the, hey, join my draft, and some people signed up to join it. And when you do that, it sends whoever set up the league like $10 in their account. So I don't know if I won $100 or if that was just people signing up to come kick my ass. It looks like it was about 50-50. But I had a lot of fun drafting. And if I never get any money out of it, it's really fun just doing the draft. And occasionally you bump into people you know. Like Linda Lyons jumped in my DMs the other day, which is very rare that I ever get to talk to Linda. So I was excited. And she was there to complain that I drafted Justin Herbert just ahead of her in one of those drafts. And that was just fun. It's fun when you run into people that you know. Just casually playing some leagues, you know. And Linda's awesome. Follow her. And good point, Kyle. I think I would prefer the flexibility of 2023 thirds and go with the Burke side, but it feels very close in value. I think that's fair. Yeah, I'm a baby high-stakes player, which means you're a giant high-stakes player compared to me. Again, $3 is more than enough for me to bet on a draft. Yeah, it's really tough. Got offered, so I figured I'd ask to see if we have the same thought process. Oh, Ron's talking to Kyle here. I think he's talking to someone else, but I've played poker once and I won and I wasn't invited back. It was very strongly beginner's luck. I don't really know poker. I only started playing 2 years ago, but my talent is knowing who to listen to. Nice. My talent is flexibility, I think. Setting up strong rules, but only as they become apparently obvious. And also I don't know what my talent is. I'm very willing to listen. I'm very willing to be wrong and just move on from the things I thought before. If it's anything, it's not accepting things at face value. Whether it sounds like common sense or I'm told it by someone I trust very deeply, I always kind of verify just as a matter of instinct. I think if I have an edge or a talent or however you want to call it, it's that I need to verify. It's just kind of in my nature. I do play chess a lot. I try to teach most of my kids. Mostly I just kind of play it by myself at this point. But I enjoy it. Well, average player though. What else do you gamble on? I don't even see Dynasty as gambling, to be honest with you. I don't gamble. It's not like I have a moral, I don't like it. It's not that I have a moral judgment about it at all. I don't like it. That's the way I was trying to say that sentence. In that I really enjoy the games, but I do not come from a place where money was in abundance, and I have never been in abundance with money, and money lost isn't just it's grocery money in my head, even when it's not like we're not comfortable, don't get me wrong. But I give you the story. Me and my wife took our vacation through Arizona to see the Grand Canyon and stuff, but we started out in Las Vegas because where else do you start out? And we had a great time there. I actually as an Englishman, getting to see the West Coast, that's my experience. And we got to see Vegas, and it was an amazing place, and I love the casinos and the history of it. It was just a really interesting time. But obviously while you're there, you gamble because that's what it's for. By the time we left, I had been up like 200 on different machines here and there, and so had my wife. When we left, we felt so low that actually took us a few days of our honeymoon to start feeling happy again. Because those first few days we spent in Vegas, we had a great time, but we lost grand total up and down $40. And we felt sick about it for days. $40. It's a vacation to the West Coast. We were spending a lot more than $40. $40 was nothing, but just it's not that it's a lot of money or it's difference making. It's just it's not that it's right or wrong. It just doesn't feel good to me. which is weird because that doesn't even make logical sense. I would spend $40 on going to a theme park and would have probably about as much fun as I did in Vegas, but for some reason, that sense of loss, my internal self doesn't know how to calculate that, and so it just leaves me feeling bad. And I'm like, I just don't need it. Like, I don't believe in rainbows or lottery wins. I don't think that's how most of us are gonna succeed in life. I think it's mostly that little carrot on the end of the stick that makes you keep doing things for the people that actually have money or do win the lottery by birth or actually winning the lottery or hard work. So I don't actually think the upside, the fun end of it was the game, and it left me feeling bad. Not because that's how I should feel, it's just how I ended up feeling, so I go in for it. I have to say, I really did love a lot of the games. The casinos are so much fun to be in, but that's why I don't gamble. Not because it's logically you shouldn't do it or anything like that. I don't like the feeling it left me with. I didn't like the feeling it left me with when I made money on some of those games. For some reason, that felt icky. I don't know. I'm just not built that way. I'm built worse. Sorry, that was way too long for a very simple question, but I can't think of anything else. I really don't think of Dynasty and Fantasy. It is, very clearly it is, by the way, just in case there's anyone in here not thinking they're gambling money. And that's why I keep my stakes so low. It's basically paying to play a game with my friends as much as I would pay to do anything else. And as long as I can think of it that way, it's very fun. If I think of it as trying to win money, for some reason, it leaves me, even when I win, it feels bad. So futures football, politics, world events. I gamble with my life every time I leave the house. That's probably a better answer. Good job. Good night, chat. Keep grinding, PA. Howdy. Thank you, FF Lefties. Again, sorry I was late. Thanks once again. No problem, Ron T, if that was to me. Lefty here the whole world. He was here the whole time. I think he at least came in to say goodbye. He realized finally I got here, maybe. I don't know. Didn't even say anything. Tapped in late, wiped out. We'll watch the replay. It starts late. Just as a spoiler. I play in a 25-man league disguised as a Dynasty League. We draft on Sunday. Good luck, man. Is it a live draft? That sounds like so much fun. I've never got to do a live draft. It sounds like a lot of fun, you know? Glorified redraft league. Honestly, Dynasty is just a redraft league with more flaws when you think about it a certain light. There's less ways of changing your roster. That's the difference. Changing your mind means you're wise. Sometimes. I don't think I've ever done anything that could be called wise, but I appreciate the thought. Research. Yeah, you're not built for gambling. It's pretty clear when I start trying to articulate my thoughts on it. Yeah, that guy shouldn't gamble. I'm just not interested in beating other people. I know that sounds weird because I love the argument and winning in fantasy football, but no, it's just want to play a game. Does it have to be a loser? Yes, it does. And as long as it's not me, no, I don't know. It's just not. I'm just built weaker. Definitely, if I had a family, I wouldn't gamble as much. It's not even about the money. Like I said, we felt sick of a $40 loss, which we'd spent. I mean, if you've been when we were there, I know the prices in Vegas fluctuate a lot, but like $40 would get one of us a meal. So, like, we were technically wasting more money on Coke than we wasted on gambling. But I don't know. I've said it as clear as I can. I don't think it's a intellectual thing. It's just something that I enjoyed. I really enjoyed the games though, but the gambling aspect, like if you were just paying to play the game, honestly think I'd enjoy it. Because the games are awesome. I love cards. I love those little roulette tables. I really love pulling little levers and watching the numbers spin round and the feeling you get that you can predict where the thing's gonna land. There's a lot of fun games there from dice. But yeah, there are games that are free, you know. And buying into a league is gambling. It definitely is. Again, to be clear, where there's actually gambling problems out there, and almost every DFS show starts out with the Gambling Anonymous hotline is. Like, just to be clear, fantasy should be considered gambling. I'm doing internal trickery while being fully aware I'm gambling my money. Yeah, if you're doing it to win money, it's gambling. Those laughs. Yeah, when I win money, I feel awesome. I feel dangerously fun. That's great, Joe. I feel bad. if that makes it's not bad, just icky in some way. I don't know. I don't know. I love winning fantasy football leagues, partly because I mental jigger it into something different. Yeah, there's better things than winning money. Much better. Winning a game with no money as a prize is pretty awesome, actually. And the only time I don't care about winning is when I'm shrooming. Fair enough. Coke? That's a random question. I have a can of Coke sitting here, right here, as a matter of fact. Come again. I think we both missed something here. Oh, what is shrooming? I have no idea, honestly. I just tend to pretend I understand when people use slang that I don't know. It sounds like there's either some sort of fun, youthy game that I'm not aware, or maybe it's hallucinogenic mushrooms where they're legal. No idea. I'm an old spreadsheet guy. I don't know about the cool things. Wow. While I was gone, I got a lot of Twitter messages of people asking me why I was late. Don't you hate it when you accidentally hit the caps lock key? See, the thing is, and I don't mean to complain to you, the people that I let down by being late, but like this is legitimately the 3 hour period of the week I look forward to. Now, don't get me wrong, getting to see my kids and my wife, it's a different kind of happiness event. But the thing I look forward to doing that isn't spending time with my family is this 3 hour period. And it's partly because I get to talk to Zach or Russ or both sometimes. And as fun as it is talking to you guys, like I missed out talking to Zach and Russ this weekend. It kind of sucks, especially to go to work. So not to complain, but just so you know, I got hurt by it too. Like legitimately, that makes my worse significantly worse. So I'm getting a comeuppance of some sort, just to be clear. But again, since we started, this is literally the first week we're even late, let alone not run. Someone's got interesting Scott Fishbowl thoughts. Oh, sorry. Legal. Okay, so it is hallucinogenic magic mushroom type things. It sounds like it would be that, but again, the language of the youth can be very confusing. It's an antidepressant. Do the research. I would, but I don't need them. Did that sound flippant? Didn't mean to be. Like I would research it. It's just not an area. Fair enough. I know, kind of miss Zach and Russ. Yeah, it's always fun getting to see him. I got to talk to Zach yesterday from my own podcast that I've got to cut down and edit and release next week. And with Jacob, it's not the same. It's not a Dynasty Grind. It's not us kicking with you guys. Oh no, Kyle. Yeah, that's probably what he was talking about. And Coke. That's the thing. No, I mean literal Coca-Cola. The drinks there were incredibly expensive. Like literally, if you didn't order Coke, it was the price of a meal when we go out to eat here. It was like $20 for the Cokes. Like seriously, it was again small town boy living in a small town in Kentucky. Vegas prices were the epitome of a small town boy going like $20 for 2 Cokes. That probably sounds normal to anyone that lives in London or New York or Chicago or a big place where prices are higher. For me, it was it was crazy. But yeah, literally, we'd spend more because especially then, like I've literally cut sodas out my life. Not that we should be talking a lot about sodas. I don't drink it anymore, except for occasional one when I'm talking a lot, and so I need quick boosts of energy and also liquid. But At the time, that's literally all we drank. So we would have Cokes every meal, and because the Cokes literally came to about $17 on top of the price of the meal. So technically, I think we were gambling. We were spending more on Cokes on a daily basis than we lost in total on gambling the entire time we were there. But we didn't feel bad about buying drinks, you know? That was why I was bringing it up. Sorry, that was probably random out of context. No, you could... It seems like Russ is always tired. Well, Russ is... I like giving Russ some little side elbow shit, but Russ is doing a lot, you gotta remember. He's like the director of the DLF podcast network. He's on 3 different podcasts. He's doing regular YouTube videos with Addison to try and, you know, help him out, get followers on the channel and whatnot. Not to mention kids. He actually has a full-time, significantly draining job and a wife. I would never admit it, but he's actually probably running himself ragged right now. And also, I think he was sick a little while ago, like many of us have been. So yeah, Russ is putting himself to the ringer. The few times he's able to come on here with us are actually a big deal. That's why I look forward to it. It's I'm surprised he's able to fit us into the amount of things he's doing. Yeah, he deserves a night off, that's for sure. Chat isn't rendering for me. I'm sorry, dude. You're on YouTube, so it should pop up right next to the video. Someone literally commented on the video, where's the live chat? I don't know how to explain it if I'm not actively looking at it, but as I remember from watching other live streams, it pops up on the right if you're on the big main screen on a PC. On a phone, I'm pretty sure it's like a drag-up menu, but anyway. Yeah, seriously, even if you have a lot of money, like that's a lot of money for Cokes, isn't it? But at the time, we were trying to be cool. Like, oh yeah, that's a normal bill. But it was a honeymoon. We're trying to be classy about it. We actually found Jimmy Buffett's, a Margaritaville place. That was the best place to eat because you could have a meal for $40 total. And even then, the Cokes were like really expensive. But we could each get a sandwich. And it's real nice food, don't get me wrong. But like anywhere, because last time Rebecca had been there, and when I'm thinking of what I'd seen in Vegas on TV, I figured we'd just be eating free buffets all the time. But that was not a thing. Apparently, trends come and go out of Vegas fairly often, and it was not the cheap food trend that we happened to go there in. But anyway, that's how I understand it. Peter, are you going on any shows soon? I go on any shows that ask. If I'm not on any shows, then it's because no one's asking me lately. It's that simple. Sorry, someone's writing me. John Hogue says he would have come on if he known he was by myself, and I'm trying to explain that I wasn't by myself. I excommunicated myself from having Zach here by being late. But I was just thinking, I don't think I've been asked to be on any podcast lately, so nothing coming up. I hope to, though. You know? We went on an expensive Coke binge. I weird foibles, you know. How does a guest host Dynasty dynamic work in the FS space? I don't know. You remember, I've been on a few podcasts that are like serious, like JJ Zacharyson asked me on his. That was a big deal, for me, and a few others. And I get the sense that the podcasting I do is not like the podcasting they do. So there's probably more seriousness to it everywhere else. What I find from the majority of people is that things like that are just titles. Everyone's happy to let everyone else be themselves. There are some people that are genuinely better at one or the other of those roles. I tend to take over if I don't have a good host, just because I don't say a lot of smart stuff, but I do tend to keep talking if no one finds a way of interrupting and guiding me. So if you've got Cal from the DLF weekly show, or J Mike is an amazing host. He asks questions that are very surprisingly precise. They push you into answers that you didn't have when you came on. That's a unique skill, actually. And also, he's just jovial, and you like to wait to hear him speak, and you do what he says. So he's a great host as well. But generally, I found the host-guest dynamic is very much a feeling back and forth between the two people or the three or the four people who happen to be there. But again, some podcasts are going to be different. They're going to have more defined roles, and someone's going to try to exert the host role and the guest role. But most of the ones I go on, you just kind of feel each other out. Do you want me to keep talking? Do you want me to direct you? Having Scott Barrett on my podcast, for example, was a striking not conflict. It was very different because Scott is used to doing much more professional guest host, and I'm used to a conversation. So I would ask for something and he would answer it like shit. And so it took me a second. I think it shows in the episode. I try and cut out most of the dead air space and the bad dead ends I took him on because I wasn't used to that. He knew how to answer the questions I asked. Whereas like us guys and me talking as Zach, we just tend to wind around a conversation. So it very much depends on the podcast and also the person, but also how far into the professional space you've got. But my experience, the ones I go on, it's very much a feeling out of how much the guest and the host want to be those roles. And for most, I find that most people I find actually more interested in just having a conversation rather than I ask a question, you answer it. I ask a question, you answer it. And honestly, listening to podcasts, I prefer those ones too. That's probably why I'm more that way. Because that feels very dry. I get bored a lot more quickly when there's a question asked and a question answered, especially since the questions, it's hard, unless you're J-Mike, it's hard to imagine the questions that everyone else wants you to ask. Whereas they get to more of the answers I'd be interested in if they just were talking about the subject instead of asking direct questions. But again, everyone's a different audience member as well as a guest or a host. That's the best I got. All right. Let's see. I'm realizing I've actually asked you to come on, and I think Zach has, and a few other people have as well. So again, I think that's the experience you'd have. You can talk around. If you don't know an answer to a question, it's fair to say, I don't know. But if you have something about the subject, you just express what you do know about the subject, and the other person kind of takes it from there. Now, if you're on a podcast with Zach, for example, he will just move on probably. Whereas if you're on a podcast with me, I will probably if you say I just don't know, I will probably try and answer it in a way that gives you one, time to think about what I'm saying, but two, tries to expand on the subject in general, trying to find something that you do have an answer or something you specifically want to mention. And then when I get to there, hopefully you interject and I will respond to what you say. And that tends to be my host, the way I play host. And I have an area that I want to talk about, so I ask the person about it. And if they don't have any specific feelings, I will start not trying to answer the question, but be talking about the subject broadly. And you can kind of tell when you get to a point where someone has an opinion. And that's what I'm trying to get to. Where in this mass of ideas and information have you found somewhere a wall to put your back up against? And that's what I want to find. I want to find the walls people put their backs up against to launch themselves forward, the areas they find there is solid ground from which to move forward on, because there's so much that is just noise and guessing, and so few things that you can actually put your back up against or rest your feet on to get a push up, or however I just said it. And I find everyone tends to have ones that I've never thought about before. Scott had some really interesting ones, I thought. So has Zach over the years. With me, it's career year and the history of when things typically happen being so stable, as we've talked about with breakouts before. And so it really depends on who you're on a podcast with. But how it typically works is if you've agreed to be on a podcast, they will send you a link. In StreamYard is how most of them get done. Some use Zoom or whatever else, and you turn up, and usually you just try and get acclimatized to each other. You have a quick conversation. Hopefully you're on time. Sometimes there's a show seat, so you ask questions back and forth about it, but generally just trying to get pretty comfortable talking to each other. Some people just go straight away, but in my experience, most want to get comfortable talking to you as much as you want to get comfortable talking to them. I find it hard to just be in a mood that is easy or would make a good podcast. You warm up as you go. And so having that time to start with is often a pretty good idea anyway, especially for me. Now, if you're a guest, you let them lead, which is a great position to be in, because honestly, as a host, the first thing I do is trying to throw that role out the window. I just ask about a random subject and hope a conversation emerges, because hell do I want to guide this shit? But on most podcasts I've been guests on, they do have, if not a show sheet, an idea of the things they want to talk about. Sometimes I'm asked on specifically because of content I've done, and they have specific questions about it, which is always the easiest way for me to be on a podcast, because I have the answers when it's purely, how does the sophomore model work? Anyway, so there's that back and forth between host and guest. And anyone who's been on a podcast before, especially if they've asked you on the podcast, they should have enough experience to know how to lean into where you're leaving space. So if you don't have a lot of answers, again, I lean in with talking broadly about the subject. Mike would probably have a following on or a segue question and lead you on to a different subject, because he's much better at it than me. Whereas I would just talk about the subject until I found something you did have an opinion on. But if you feel you seem at all lost, the other person, or the host in this case, generally steps in. Anyway, especially if it's a podcast, not a live stream, it's okay for it just to dead air and for you to start again. For example, podcasting with Matthew Kelly a couple times, he was an expert at producing content efficiently. And so I noticed he would stop talking and every now and again leave 3 seconds before he tried to say a sentence again, which makes editing just a pure dream. And I was like, I wish I could build that into my podcasting. Because watching him almost live edit himself, know that sentence wasn't right, I'm going to stop, leave myself the gap so it's easy to find in editing, then start again with the way I would see that sentence just without saying anything, was honestly pretty impressive to watch. And also the way he would come up with sentences and the best way to say them that quickly. And he was great. If you've listened to his podcast, not to big up Matthew Kelly more than, he has the accolades already. Me saying good things doesn't do well. But if you listen to his podcast long enough, as much as he's got a reputation of being a spiky disagreeer, right? If you listen to his podcast, even when he's talking with people like me that he strongly disagrees with broadly on issues, he always takes what's that term they use in acting, in improvisation? It's yes and, right? He yes ands everyone. Even if you drastically disagree on, like me, I fundamentally disagree on way athleticism matters in running back, but he never puts you in a position to be like owned on his podcast. He will take what you say and say, yes, and that's because this, and he might lead it round to his own point of view, but he never puts the guest on the back foot, unless it's an episode that's literally about trying to fight. But if you're a guest on his Sonic Truth podcast, and I've listened to a lot of them, and I've been one of them, he's very good at yes-anding his guests, despite the fact you would think, but given his reputation, he's the exact opposite. He's actually despite the fact it feels more artificial because of that ability to live edit himself, it's much easier to be on his podcast with him, despite that fact it's pretty nerve-wracking, because he's, a professional at this and I'm an amateur. But he makes it easier because he's so good at being a host that way, of being able to yes and whatever you say, even if it's something that directly contradicts what he would own you on Twitter over or whatever. So I think he's a remarkably good host that way. But I didn't mean to get into that. But you can see different evidence of different ways people go about hosting and guesting. But if you are a guest, especially if you're new, and whoever asked you on would know that, they should have expectations that they should be more willing to step in and guide you and also lean in. I think I failed a Kesh when he came on this show earlier. Like, I thought, because he's pretty well experienced with podcasting, but I felt I left him hanging out to dry when he was on the Dynasty Grind too much. Probably because, I don't know, you'd have to ask him, because he's very good at podcasting, very good at fantasy, but I felt like he was left hanging a couple times when I didn't think he would be. And I wasn't prepared for it, so I didn't step in maybe as smoothly as I should to make it feel less disjointed, especially for a live stream. He did great, by the way, but again, I think I failed because I'm a fairly terrible host at doing that element of it. I'm just kind of talking randomly about podcasting experience. Anyway, that occurs, and then typically someone will do a sign off, even if they're going to cut it and do a new sign off afterwards, and give you an opportunity through one question or another to say whatever you need to say. Please follow me on Twitter, or I have this article, everyone go read it. Typically, no one's got anything specific, but sometimes that's why they're doing podcasts. I've got this new book out. I want you to go check it out. So they leave the space for you to say something like that. And normally when it's me, it's just like, yeah, follow me on Twitter, I guess. And then podcast ends, and there's usually, it's honestly what I imagine being on stage is like, you don't want to just immediately leave. And so normally it stops and everyone just kind of sits there and was like, wow, let's have an after party conversation so I can ease back down into not doing a show. Because there is a certain amount of, even right here afterwards, it'll take me a second to just get up and go back to the rest of my life, because you're on a platform, even when it's just me and you guys. I know we're not a big show or whatnot, but it's kind of weird. It does feel that there is a state after even doing a live stream, or especially a podcast where they're recording the video as well as just the audio, because sometimes it's just the audio, and there's a sense of being on show, and it does take a minute to like come back down, and it is a down. You were up and you didn't even know it until after it stops, into just your regular state of being. If that makes sense. Anyway, and the after show conversation, if there is one, sometimes there isn't, it's actually some of the most times that's where you increase those connections. It's where I got to know Zach or J Mike or whoever I've been on podcasts with just a little bit more. And often someone says, I really have to go see my family or be back to bed now, because they end kind of late, as you might notice. And that's it. That's my experience with podcasting. It depends very much on who is the host and who is the guest, that back and forth. And that's what I'd look for. If you're thinking about doing it, I would just go on. That's the way I got used to it. I just started going on with no expectation, and here I am, wherever this is. But honestly, yeah, like if Zach's asked you to come on, and because he's told me he has, I'd strongly consider that. Zach's great to talk to, as you've seen, but especially if you go on the dummies and J Mike is around, J Mike takes all the pressure off everyone else, and he wouldn't like me saying that, but you can always kind of know he's there. And he is an extraordinarily good host. One, about asking questions, and also just about doing that grease that makes a podcast run smoothly without anyone feeling or sounding like they've been less dangling. A lot of that is cut out in editing, even if it happens, by the way, especially if it's not a live show. So yeah. And also Zach and J Mike would take care of you in the sense they give you an idea of what they were going to. It might not be a show sheet, but you'd know roughly what the subject is, and so you would have an idea of what to say. I've always worked well without a show sheet, because I won't say things about something I don't know anything about, and I tend to have pretty strong views on certain areas of most everything. So doing it loose works for me. But some people, and I've met them, like they wanted me to write down a rough idea of what they needed to prepare to come on the crossroads, even, because they're better that way. They feel more comfortable that way. So yeah, I would consider the show you're going to go on and how you want to approach it. If you want to have short-cut answers, then you're going to need a show that has a very strict guest-host relationship. Mine doesn't, and neither does the Dynasty Dummies, even when they have a guest. They're more of a back and forth. But they have two people who are much better at doing that dynamic than I am, so it's a pretty good idea. The open bar, for example, when it is in operation, between Gabe and J Mike, was really good. One, because they're both actually pretty good hosts, despite the fact they ignored that. They were good at coming up with a structure that felt loose and free and open, but there'd always be another thing to push us into another conversation when it was needed. And also Gabe's just awesome at rapping, so the theme song was awesome to listen to. But also there was like 6, sometimes more people on, so there was never a feeling of you had to interject. If anything, there was a feeling of I better say something soon, or I'm just a guy watching while being recorded doing it. And that was always an interesting show. It's one of the earliest ones I went on, and that's what made me want to keep doing it, because the open bar is so much fun to be on, whether you're new or a vet. It's just a lot of fun, because everyone there, you meet people from all sorts of walks of life in in the same community as you are. You get to know them. You get maybe to have your first interaction with them. It's such a fun atmosphere with Gabe and J Mike both directing it. And that kind of open platform is awesome when it comes to podcasting. Unfortunately, they don't seem to really be doing it right now, probably because Gabe's got a young'un to raise, not to mention everything else. So yeah, I went on about that way too long. But there's some information about podcasting. But there are also 2 live chats, DLF one and Pete's personal one. So I think that's why not. Oh, you meant rendering? Yeah, that's true. If you're watching, you're going to see the live chat from whichever channel or platform you're on, whereas I see the live chat from all of them feeding into one space. So it's not that it's not rendering, it's not showing up. Any good bourbon recommendations? Yeah, there's a bunch, obviously. I like Wild Turkey. The cost is relatively low, and yet the quality, it's basically got twice the quality of the cost, essentially. It's a mid-price bourbon that's priced slightly below. What's one that you might know? Maker's Mark is held in most bars and some such, and it's a very smooth bourbon. It's really good. It's worth the money. Wild Turkey is slightly cheaper, like 10% cheaper, and it's the same quality, but it's also got more fire to it, and I actually like bourbon with more fire rather than the smoothness. I like both, but I like the fire as well. And since it's got the cost difference as well, I tend to go for Wild Turkey. So yeah, that's the one I typically recommend to people. There's one that's real cheap, but there's a good version of it in a green label, but I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, I worked in a liquor store for a little while, basically just fun. And I learned a lot about it, but I've forgotten most of it. So Wild Turkey is my go-to recommendation. He really is. It's just also he's like Russ. He's a genuinely nice guy. Most of us are just pretending, but some people, we're trying our best to be good people. I also think Russ and J Mike at their cores are nice people just acting nice because they're nice. I think they're rarer than we think. Most of us are trying our best to be good people. And I think occasionally you meet someone you're like, you're not trying your best to be good people, are you? That's who you are. That's why I hate him so much. Like, it comes naturally to him. I'm glad you liked the Scott episode. I think it came out well, again, because he's so good. But I felt at sea a lot more because he was much more professional and ready than I was. And I'm best ad hoc. And he was like, here's a question, there's an answer. I was like, shit, now I have to come up with another question. And so it went well in the end, but most of the quality of it was he was good. He reminded me of Sean Siegel. Yeah, I mean, I think Scott's got a lot of roots back to those early RotoViz days as well. Actually, that's not a bad point. I can see how even his voice is slightly similar. He's a very interesting guy to talk to, put it that way. That's a good point. Sean's another one from, I've never podcasted with him, but listening to his shows, while he does expand a bit, he very much subject answer. He's a prepared, organized kind of individual. I'm more chaotic and unorganized. And when I'm watching streams, it's hard to watch someone scoff at questions and interrupt their guest at every opportunity. That doesn't happen on this show. I feel like I do that. I actually hate that too. It comes from loving the open bar. I love the idea of a competitive atmosphere where everyone's trying to get in and say what they mean as quickly and as memorably as possible in order that they that you notice it, and also that it comes across easily and simply and you remember it. But I do hate that. It's something I find myself increasing. Like, I went through a period of trying to learn not to interrupt, to find the timing, and also not to yes and, like Matt Kelly does, that ability to take what someone says and not be like, I'm smarter than you, but take what they said and almost learn from it as you express what you think. Why do I think differently than you is a lot better way to take what someone says than trying to explain why they're wrong. And yeah, I completely agree. I fear it's still a flaw in the way I podcast with other people, though, because I'm so interested to try, when it gets to something I have an opinion on, I'm too eager to say something. They just answer, yeah, that's exactly right. I think it shows an organized pattern of thought, which I do not I get a small smile when I hear him say Marcus Brown. That's fair. Okay. Joe's working up to it. I think that's very fair. Like the last thing I wanted to do was be filmed, by the way. Like I love when I was first getting into the space, I kind of knew that it was either a podcast or I was going to have to be on a video at some point. And I tried to convince myself it wasn't necessary because I hate it. But honestly, slowly but surely I worked myself into it. Now, because basically I've managed to switch it from being on a stage to getting to go talk to some really interesting people about fantasy live instead of through a tweet or through an article or through a comment on an article. You can actually ask Zach and he directly tells me, and that's what I think live streams are so great, because you get to challenge the stupid things I say as we go instead of having to comment, wait for me to read the comment, reply back with probably a link to an article that you've then got to go read. It's so much less. I enjoy it, don't get me wrong. I think there's a place for that too. But the fact podcasts before we even had all this social media, podcasts were, in as much abundance, podcasts were a way to have a live conversation about fantasy football. And the minute I got comfortable with it as that, so fun. Yeah. Yes. That's also what a good host is pretty much able to do that I don't think I'm at. And again, I do think it's somewhere that Cal and J Mike and Matt and all the other hosts I mentioned that are good are able to do. They're able to take what you say and say, so what you're saying, and almost give you a summary to then say, because sometimes I don't have a firm summary. And then a good host will be like, so exactly what you're saying is draft running backs after their second year that fall in value. I'm like, yeah, that adds up. And suddenly you've got a conclusion. And you're right. That's what makes content. I did a radio spot once where the host abandoned me for 5 minutes. That was painful. Yeah, you get that too. Sometimes people just throw something at you and you feel left hanging or set adrift. There's very much a sense of being pushed into a spotlight with no assistance. I mean, it's not that that's always terrible. I mean, you learn through fire. That's the way I was taught to teach. I was thrust in front of a classroom by yourself. Teach them. There is some value to that. But I think in a podcast, personally, for me, the good hosts are the ones who can do that without you feeling like you're set adrift, but you very much come up against it. Again, the way I've gotten around it is just learning not to vamp, but I will talk about the subject rather than trying to answer the question. And that's how I can fill space. And as you can see, a lot of space with lots of words, very little said. But yeah, I've been on podcasts where I'm like, man, this just went bad. But again, a lot comes through with editing, and sometimes your experience of a podcast isn't what the podcast was like. Some of my least favorite shows with Jake back in the early Crossroads days, we'd finish recording and we were just mad at each other. Genuinely, not real. I never felt a negative emotion towards Jake, but honestly, it was just a tense episode, and we're like, all right. And you leave it a while because you don't just want to log off like you're mad at them. But yeah, we'd log off and I'd feel like that episode is going to be so bad. And I'd cut it up and I could hear that in the podcast, but I needed up as well as I could. I put it out, and some of those were the most commented on, the most highly downloaded episode. Like those are the ones that people liked. Because like you said, we were forcing each other to a place where we had a firm conclusion, and that's content. And you give yourself a day and suddenly those tense feelings of disagreeing with someone avidly go away. It can get weird sometimes because taking yourself to that place is not comfortable. Like you can't live there. Like constantly being in a avidly defended position, even just for fun, can actually bring out emotions. Like, again, we'd end the episode and we'd kind of be mad at each other. Not really, but kind of the emotion would be there even though you weren't mad at the person, because that's where you take yourself to disagree fervently on something. And yeah, it's weird. You kind of create the emotion, but it's not about the person. It's about the argument you guys were not performing, because you're saying the things you actually. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, there's a weird. I can, not that I understand, but I can kind of get why some actors talk about the process and how it's a spiritual experience. I don't really understand that, but I do get how it could be higher than, it's more than just two people talking. There's a, you go through emotions, you put yourself in this, especially when you're acting, so you're creating face, like more extreme emotions sometimes. I don't know. I could see how it could be a, I don't know. I still think they take it a little seriously, but yeah, there is a disembodiment almost. I don't know. I have no idea. It came out of the blue. Yeah. Again, you can just be left hanging. Podfathers. Yeah, there's a reason he's succeeded in this business. It's not just because he's got a funny face or he makes good takes or he knows how to wear things that make him look ridiculous and you click on the thumbnail when he's putting the glasses on and stuff, or because he built a website. He's genuinely good at this. I mean, you don't get somewhere like he's one of the few that built it by himself as well. Not just the website and the profile, but built the image and the brand. Like DLF is a group of friends, you got to remember, and they've done it, but they had each other. Matt built it from the ground up because he thought it could be built. He thought there was space. I mean, there's lots of things he's done. He said things about Jake I still disagree with, and we said it to each other at the time. But I mean, that doesn't mean he's bad at this. It doesn't mean you can't respect what he's good at. And he's supremely good at content and podcasting, making takes that are memorable and action-based and make you understand what he's genuinely good at this. Content game and also fantasy, to be fair. He got flaws, don't get me wrong. Lots of people don't like the playing the bad guy attitude, or the fact that he's got an attitude, or the fact... I don't know, but I definitely can respect there's some, like, I just can't do that. And genuinely never again be as good as creating content at him, if nothing else. He's got a talent. Talent can't be reproduced, you know? I think it's fair to mention it. I think you can accept that. Matt Kelly is an example. You can be successful in this industry and wrong on so many things. That's fair. And I would like to say, yeah, ha ha ha. But honestly, we're all wrong on so many things. I think the fact is he's memorably wrong because he's good at being memorable. That doesn't necessarily mean he's wrong more often. And we track each other so poorly, not me and Matt, but us as an industry. Like, who is more right than everyone else? I know 4for4 has remarkably accurate rankings because they're in that one thing and they get to say it at the front of their podcasts. And then there is those Fantasy Pros, isn't it? Tracks rankings, but that in itself is a game. I know how to game that system, for example, and have more accurate. I'm not saying everyone at the top of that isn't really good at fantasy, but it's not an accurate tracking. And then his not taking the L stance, that was more, I think, trying to learn on how to be better at making content that people like, and therefore you get more popular. Maybe I can quit the 7 jobs I do. I don't like that. Like, I don't want that to be part of my process. I think that is wrong. Don't take the L. But I still remember it, and it made him and also his takes more memorable. And I'm not sure that a lot of the things that I think a bad process that he has pushed, like not taking the L, not admitting you're wrong, were just really great ways of making his content and takes more memorable, which is actually what bad fantasy process, but maybe he was actually playing good content there, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I've seen him play in leagues, and I don't think there is a ranking, but I don't think he's like secretly a bad fantasy player or anything like that. I think he's good at this too. And I think a lot of the stuff that people don't like is him knowing what buttons to push to make himself memorable. Part of this is just being memorable, which is why I suck. I'm never going to be able to do that. I'm turning the music off, by the way. It's been playing way too long. But yeah, he's genuinely good at content, and he is good at fantasy, even though, like all of us, he's got some clunkers in his history. for sure. This is awesome ground level insight. I don't know how on the ground I am, to be fair. If sometimes I feel like, because I got a couple of Twitter followers, like I'm in this thing, I know stuff. But follow accounts are definitely fictitious, even if they're real people. And other times I'm like, I'm honestly I don't know. And to be fair, I'm sharing what I think about Matthew Kelly as another audience member. It's not like I have inside information on Matt. Like, I went on his podcast a couple of times because I was lucky enough to be part of do a job for that company for a second. It's not like we became friends or I know more than you do about him. Again, where he's so good at live editing himself, from my experience podcast with him, if you listen to that episode, you basically had the same the exact same conversation we had. The only thing that happened before it was I was nervous because, I mean, that's a guy that's like, I've been listening to your podcast. Him and JJ are the two people that I was honestly a little starstruck, because those are guys I've been listening to for a long time. They were famous in my eyes. And so he took a couple minutes to try and stop me doing that. He was very nice about it, but it must have been a time suck for him when I think about it now, because he just needed to do an episode, and here's this starry-eyed idiot who's going to sound nervous if I can't calm him down. And so we took a couple of minutes just to chat to try and take that away, and I think it succeeded. I think the episode came off fairly well. But yeah, to be clear, I don't have inside information on Matt Kelly or anything. I'm just another audience member. But as someone who's tried to make content, I think I've identified that he's very talented at it. And I try and learn, no matter what you think of that sounds like I think bad things, and I generally don't, apart from what he did about Jake. So yeah, that's nonplussed. But yeah, just to be clear, this isn't inside information on Matt Kelly or J Mike or Zach or anyone. I know about as much of them as you do. I was fortunate enough to be on a podcast with JJ and Matt Kelly once. But I don't know any more about them. What I'm talking about is my experience of watching their content, just like you all do. I have no more information than that, and trying to identify what makes it hit so hard. And I think it's because they're genuinely good at it. It's not just, I don't know, because he's loud or whatever. He's really good at making it memorable. I don't know how to express. If I did, I'd have the talent, and I don't. But he's very good at making content that sticks in your mind, that is memorable, and at least 50% of the time somewhat useful, which is best as any of us can hope for. Or go to his YouTube page. Yeah, honestly, you could get as much insight into watching it. I don't know any more about him. And hey, good point. Hey, Toronto Dave. Well-rounded answer, Peter. I hope so. I hope some of them sometimes are. She might one day decide to go on one. I think you'd have a lot of fun eventually. I honestly, the first time would probably be fun, especially if you choose the right one. But it's like anything else. Again, I enjoy it a lot more now than when I first started trying to do it, but I still look back on those early attempts. It's fun. I met most of the people I still talk to now are through my first early podcast, and I'm really glad I did them in the end. But I understand the hesitation, because I do not like a lot of this. A lot of it is I don't like attention, but I do like conversations, and yeah, it's a give and take in that regard. And you should. And also, if you want to, it's not just because Joe's great, so everyone would have her on a podcast. You should ask. It's like anything else. If you want to do something, it's weird. It's taken me almost 40 years to figure this out. You have to ask. Like, if you want to get published somewhere, write something, show it to someone. Like, would you be interested in this on your website? And if you want a guest on a podcast, say, here's my Twitter account. I would like to talk about this subject. I really like your podcast. Would you be interested? Would you let me guest on your podcast sometimes? Again, like Joe asked me what podcast I am, largely none. And I don't think that's because soon. What am I going to be on soon? I don't think that's because I couldn't find podcasts to be on. It's because I don't think to go out and ask. So most people you go and ask, would you guess, can I guest on your podcast, would be like, yes, we need guests. And that saves me from having to suck it up to go ask more people. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. If I go ask and be on, hey, Rotoviz, can I be on a podcast? They're probably going to be like, yeah, one day, Pete. I mean, DLF won't even have me on, or hasn't had me, I should say, on the main DLF podcast. So, you know, I'm no one. But I think most people running podcasts are looking for people to talk to. So you should always ask. Dave, if you want to be on one, go ask the person who runs it that you like. Can I be on your podcast? Most of them, especially if they have guests regularly, will be like, yeah, that'd be great because I have a schedule to run and I don't have anyone for this date. Are you available? Same with you, Joe. Just ask when you're ready. You'll find, as a community, we tend to be fairly open to that kind of stuff. And I found that even a tough idea of topics on podcasts or radio sports were a huge help in having a smooth show for the guest side. Having a tough idea for topics. I don't know if it has to be difficult or esoteric or particularly challenging, although those are all good things. And I think having a general idea of what the subject is definitely helpful for a guest. So even as someone who likes to kind of riff it, I need to know if I'm talking rookies, and we can segue into the NFL, but are we starting on the general conversation of rookie hits or one particular rookie player or a particular position? It's definitely, and at least a loose skeleton makes it much easier for guests. So when I have guests, I tend to like throw them the three main questions I have, which is, what is your process? Why is that your process? What are the results this year? And then give them the subject we're going to try and ask those questions about. So with Scott, that's literally those three questions. And I said, I think I want to talk to you mostly about rookie wide receivers this year. He talked about a lot of other stuff, but that was a framework. And he knew kind of where my head, I hoped, especially as good as Scott is at this game, they knew roughly where my head was at. Because those are pretty much my three questions for, if I could ask anyone in this fantasy space, what are your three questions? It's, what is your process for X? Why is that your process? Which is an under-asked question, in my opinion. And then what are the results? Which is an over-asked question for this coming season. Yeah. Don't do it if you don't want to. But if you do want to, I'd recommend biting the bullet at some point. It's never going to be it's always going to be tough to start, but it gets fun. Or it doesn't. You won't like it and you don't have to. But find out if you are interested in it. All sorts of guests and hosts make good. If you don't think you sound like the people you think are good at this, put it this way. The best ones are people who come up who are different. Kuda Doodle. It's one of the best rocket rises I've seen in recent years, right? It's because she's drastically different from Matt Kelly or from Matthew Berry or from JJ Zacharyson. It's not because she's similar to them that she exceeds or has rocketed up. And she's a fan favorite. I'm a fan. She's one of my favorites. That counts. Stop it. It's because she's remarkably different than everyone else and she's doing different things. Same with JJ. The reason he hit is because the way he podcasts and the way he has a crisp, clean, he sounds like he's reading from notes without ever making notes. And yet it doesn't sound like he's reading off paper. The cleanliness of that thought almost is remarkably different from the jovial group conversation between friends that I like to do and largely predominated the space before he started making his late round podcast grind thing. And before that, he obviously rocketed success through a number of other things. And also the back and forth between him and on Living the Stream. So there's a lot to that, and I'm simplifying it. But yeah, if you don't think you sound like current pop, that's a good thing. Start thinking of it that way. You don't have to be anything. You have to be you. You do trying to polish it up a little bit, whether you want to be more mean or less mean or more smooth, and you do find a way of rounding your sentences. I think you develop into it. But the goal is to be a better content version of yourself, not to be a version of someone else's content. Yeah, that almost sounded right. Something like that. Don't worry if you don't have certain things that you think someone would need. That's not the thing. It's being a content branded version of yourself that you're trying to accomplish. Like I am an esoteric, weird ass kind of dumb, eccentric professor. Like if an eccentric professor or if an eccentric mad scientist was actually a moron, that is kind of me. And so I lean, it's not that I'm leaning into that persona, it's the more you polish up who I am, the closer it kind of gets to something like a rendition of that, because it's a rendition of myself ultimately. And I am this self-hating, but also it's polished a little bit. Like I couldn't exist if I was honestly this self-hating all the time. You know what I mean? It's me, but it's a version of me. It's weird. Acting must be even weirder. Johnny Walker label isn't. Well, that's not a bourbon. It's a Scotch for a start. Also very good though, and that's not what I was thinking of in terms of the green label. I really can't think of that one right now. I used to have one. Some notes somewhere, but I don't anymore. Jaha, I hate that too. Puffer that does it and still does, but he's still one of my favorites. You were talking to John Webb. I don't know what I can't find it back, but yeah. And again, I think that's fine. It's fine just to admit that that's sort of a really good making a show that you want and enjoy listening to. That's kind of nice. I'm interested in the 10%, which is Dynasty fascinates me. I love talking about it. I love trying to get better. But really, the industry part of this, 90% of it is entertainment. I mean, it's a game about a game. It is entertainment, full stop. Even though some people are gambling on it, some people are making money. It's entertainment. Even gambling technically fits into the play area of society, so it's all entertainment. And here's serious game when it comes to entertainment. You can't really just not acknowledge that if you want to get or improve at it. You got to look at people who are doing it well. Realize some hosts and guests have ADD or ADHD and inadvertently cut people off. Maybe. But it's also that conversation part of it. Like you ever needed to say something so you don't forget exactly the way you wanted to say it. That's an important, again, where you're trying to round what you think into something content form. If you suddenly get like, oh, that's the way to say it, you immediately want to say it. And sometimes it cuts people off. Me, I'm just rude. I do it and I feel bad while I'm doing it, but it's not like I stop talking. Let's see if there's a cleaner way to put that. At a certain point, it's better to follow through than try and cut it off in the middle. Is that a clean way of saying that? If I catch myself early enough, I'll try and back up and let that person talk. But if I have to say, no, you carry on, then I was probably too far into interrupting them before trying to back out. Not because they're jerks or they don't care, but they're about to lose it. Yes, you're ahead of me. Sometimes that just happens. Yeah. I don't listen to a lot of Chad Parsons podcasts. Not shade, just I don't fit him in. So I can't. From the ones I've listened to, he seems to be pretty good at content creation himself. He might be. Can't comment on it. Yeah. Why am I stuttering over this? Because I'm trying to extract some information that I don't have. All I can tell you is my experience from watching their content and also the little interaction I've had of him. He treats his employees extremely well. If you're working for him, he's going to treat you well. He's going to do you right, and he's going to do exactly what he says as well. He's actually, my experience, doing that one small job for the company, so was perfect. And from someone watching his content, I think there's a lot to learn about content creation. And I don't know him personally, so I can't comment on his actual personality. I can understand he comes off that way. Maybe that's true or not. And if that's what he did to you, I would also feel like that's wrong. I would not. Doesn't matter what anyone else says. That's people shouldn't go off on you because they're insecure. I will admit I haven't listened to a lot of Matt's content in a long time. I get it. It's like Chad Parsons. It's not like these aren't content giants in the space. I get relatively small amount of time to fit content digestion in rather than content creation. And so I tend to prioritize podcasts, one that I prefer and two that my friends do because I'm going to talk to them next week. So I make sure I listen to the Dynasty Dummies and the Dynasty Tradecast. All the DLF podcasts are all obviously queued up first because I'm talking to those guys and I want to hear what they have to say in general, and they might say it before I ask on their podcasts. And by the time the week rolls around and there's a whole bunch of new podcasts, I don't always get around to them. So I haven't actually fit in like a Sonic Truth or I stopped listening to them intentionally after the insult of Jake because that was way off base, like I said before. And I just never went back. So. That's fair. I could say, if someone's treated you bad, you should that's who they are. But I can only comment on my experience. And he did to Jake, which is where that watching his content broke off on. But he treated me as an employee fairly. He totally passed me off. I wasn't going to stoop to his level. Sorry that happened to you, man. Do you find that most successful content creators become successful organically? Like they started out creating content for fun and a hobby, like the ideal? And I don't know. It's not like I've done a study of it. And just because I, again, have a couple Twitter followers, it's not even that many relative to the people that we're talking about. They're like 4, 5, 10 times bigger audience. Not just his show, but like even my follower count. So we're talking well above my heavyweight here. Let's see. Would I say the best ones? I don't know. I've seen some people intentionally go out and become it that are just kick ass. Ray GQ. I think he came in with the intention of being a thing, made himself a thing. And I think he's legit. Like, I think he's fun. I think he's funny. I think his content's real. I think his analysis is really valuable. Same with Matt Harmon. Different kind of content, but he intended to make an interesting, exciting piece of content that people would love and become what he is off of it. And he did. And that was intentional. Kudo Doodle, it feels like she just stumbled into, oh, wait, everyone thinks I'm hilarious? Cool. And also she plays fantasy and she's pretty shrewd at it. Don't let her fool you. So I don't know. I don't know if it's more organic or more not, but I don't think being organic or not being organic means you're more likely to be, legit, as it were. I think it comes from both sides of the aisle. And I think it's always some sort of mixture of both. I think increasingly we're going to see more creating themselves and organically bubbling up. Again, we're becoming more of an industry than a community, or at least the community is letting an industry build up around it. We're getting bigger. The fantasy space is increasing. There's more money getting invested. That's one way you can see it's becoming an actual industry. We used to refer to it as an industry when it wasn't. I think there's actually industry here. People are doing startup companies, getting loans, starting big leagues for small entry fees to make an actual living off of fantasy. It's becoming an industry. It is. And so you're going to slowly see people creating themselves more than organically coming up. That's just a natural tendency because the market's changing. Not that I'm a business historian, but the little I know about it, I would say that was normal. You are starting to see people who are much better at creating engagement. That's becoming increasingly part of the fantasy community. People who are good at creating engagement and tweets and likes and getting followers, not necessarily because they made a Matt Harmon piece of content or they are genuinely skilled at it, like Sean Siegel. He just has a natural talent for fantasy football. Or John Bosch, for that matter, would be in the same category. As his naturally thinks in a way that's advantageous for playing fantasy football. Or organically, you just strike everyone's funny bone like Kudo Doodle. Instead, you're going to see people intentionally striking people. And I think we are seeing more of that as there's more money. And so there's more money to make it worth the effort. We have a few at DLF, and they're much more popular and successful in this space than I'll ever be. And again, I don't think that's necessarily means they're less legit. You're going to find legit people who also have that skill set. So I don't think it matters would ultimately be my answer here, Eric. You're going to see more people, probably going to see more created than organically fostered. But I don't think that necessarily speaks to quality. Some people we've held up organically because they're just popular and they're not particularly adding an edge and they're not particularly entertaining in podcasts. And honestly, we've got 5 of them that they could disappear, but they organically grew up to be a thing. Sure, they probably exist as well. We're growing, and there's always been space for more people. So I wouldn't discount anything. And again, what my history teacher and physics teacher always used to say is their attitude was different teachers are going to work for different people. And if you think about fantasy space as a place where they're trying to, and as I do, trying to help and improve themselves at playing fantasy football, all those different created, non-created, they might just help different people than you. So I think there's more than enough space. And I think it's going to increasingly be, because there's more money, people are going to try to become this instead of organically created. I think that's probably going to become more common. I think it is becoming more common. I don't think it's going to stop that organic growth either, though, because if good is good is good, and we're still more community than we are industry. So there's always going to be a path to organic growth as well. As opposed to someone who's trying to get into created content and make it a full-time job. Yeah, I went on that way too long, but that's probably the answer I got for you. You do fine. And again, I can't speak to Joe's experience here, but the podcast I have listened to him on, and the one that I got to do with him, it was actually incredibly easy. Because again, he's got content chops for sure, in my opinion. He's very process oriented. I've listened to him with continuation. His breakdowns are impeccable. Don't let his bombastic approach. I actually think the answer is closer in the middle. I am process driven, not to a fault. There's a point at which I say there's just a shade of gray here. You throw the dice. Matt's very good at articulating a decision, a process that would lead up to the decision he's made sometimes. He does that sometimes. There is a certain amount of backtracking his answer, looking for what would be a process that led to his answer. Because honestly, there are some areas in this game that you just kind of do have to throw the dice, but he's good at making them seem like there's a process behind him. I think that's honestly why athleticism and player profile, I've been focusing on that, has been such a feather in his cap. Because there's so many ways you can use that to explain what happened, even though it's not predictive or suggestive or there's not correlation. And he knows to hand wave some of those stats away. I've heard him do it on some of his shows. The nerds want to care about correlation, but sometimes correlation there isn't anything that correlates significantly. It's all dice rolling, so why not bet on this thing? So he's not impeccably, in my opinion, process driven, but it's because some of this can't be impeccably process driven. And there are some areas he's just overly dependent on things that sound right. I think there's areas he can improve. There is areas everyone can improve. Yeah, but he's definitely got the numbers, right, if he needs them. And he's very good at articulating an argument. That's really important. He's really good at it. You see, again, all logical, all makes sense, deserves to be said. Here's the thing. It doesn't. That's what I mean. rookies are essentially a gamble. Honestly, me to you and me to the world, every time I've evaluated rookies, we really don't know. We can make better or worse educated guesses. But of the things we have at our disposal to make those educated guesses, I'm not just doing it for the meme. I'm not doing it because of a correlation score. Athleticism, once a player is in the NFL, genuinely does not seem to matter. Yeah, we could argue about some small samples where honestly we know we're arguing stuff you could probably never know about upside and whether you have to be Calvin Johnson built to have Calvin Johnson upside. Maybe. But in terms of success at fantasy at any level that you care to name, athleticism genuinely doesn't seem to matter. To get to the NFL, you have to be good enough with whatever athleticism you have to get there. And that's not to say there aren't outliers on either side. Like Donovan Peoples-Jones probably doesn't stick in the league this long if he's not that athletic. Tutu Atwell, however, probably doesn't get in the league at his size if he's not that good. And yet both still don't matter for fantasy. And so they prove the curves that really don't exist. But again, when we don't know, making a compelling argument with something that sounds right, I mean, why not? Breakout age was a Sean Siegel invention. Matt has made the case successfully enough that we associate it with him. BMI, again, is one of those things that genuinely, no meme, it's just me, you, and 20 other people, and I'm definitely not going to make money at this. I think it's clearly clear at this point. This isn't me trying to stake my claim on an opposite point of view. I looked at it 6 ways from Sunday. I've heard statisticians who definitely know more than me say it does, and yet fall down at simple questions that a moron has. And again, a fool can ask more questions than a genius can answer. I understand that. But like simple hurdles that BMI should be able to jump over if it matters in the sense we mean when we say that, it genuinely doesn't. But it's not like we have anything else that does, particularly. And it makes he's used it to make such a compelling argument that it seems like it should. That's not wrong. It's not bad. It's seeing how he's so very good, and yet it's not a process. Sometimes he's also a smart man who has strong process skills. Again, he can play fantasy. I would not say I'm a better fantasy player than him or anyone we've talked about tonight. I think all of these people are good fantasy players from Kuda to on down and up. So yeah, it's not like he doesn't have it, but I think it's really interesting to try and find those lines. And where I'm not skilled, I have no natural talent either at content or fantasy football. I think it's really interesting. That's been the challenge for me to find out where that line is. I don't know where the compelling argument meets the thing that actually matters, or really what mattering means. I think if we can take the colloquial sense of mattering, like genuinely, I love breakout age for a really long time, and that creates great hit rates, but hit rates become useless at a certain point when it comes down to an individual decision. Like the majority of players drafted, the overwhelming majority have breakout ages between 18 and 20, which is where the golden band of breakout age happens. So what does it matter? Because the few players that are drafted with like first round capital that have age 21 breakout age, half of them broke out, which creates this weird 50% category because there's value to it, but in and itself isn't, and we're not going to get to the end of the story. Age adjusted prediction, for example, is a continuation of the thought process, and it's a little bit better at making individual decisions on one player or the other. But even then, not really, because you have to make exceptions and Calvin Ridley rules. And sorry, I'm getting into stuff I don't really understand, but it's interesting, isn't it? And it's not that he doesn't have would come nowhere near to saying he's not very process driven and isn't doing it immaculately or whatever else you said. But it's interesting, those things you associate with him, I definitely know aren't that. But you also got to recognize that the fact he's able to make him that is just a gift of content creation, we're calling it right now, but it's also just rhetoric and argument, and where there is nothing to put your back against, as I said earlier, you have to just make a gamble. And it's a solid thing to make a gamble on. He's made it he's made lots off of it, and it's valuable. I doubt you're talking to me there. He is very, I mean, he literally owns one of the biggest analytical webs. He's definitely very analytical. Was it? I've forgotten. I don't know what I said, but I'll take it. And the reason I'm sticking around, by the way, is because I was late. I feel like I've got some apologies to make up for, so I'm going to push myself into sleep deprivation for tomorrow for you all. Okay. Yeah, I'm not saying like you. Again, I don't think I'm stating nothing, literally about his actual results, because I don't know him. I haven't tracked him. He seems to do pretty well, in my opinion, and we all have hits and misses. Well, I have probably more than most. Definitely worth considering. Honestly, I mean, that's another very of that kind of bombastic. Like, he encourages the idea that you should agree or disagree, and I think that's a good thing to have in the fantasy space. That attitude made me think I'm allowed to just disagree with you. No, that's not just fun. I think it's the right way to go about a fun game where we have so much variance. I think I got that from that bombastic attitude some people don't like about him. That you could be bombastic meant that you could disagree, and it encourages it, and that's not a bad thing either. Probably underrated that he and others, to be fair, by playing the bad guy, you have to have a bad guy to disagree with, so someone has to play the bad guy. To be fair. Nate Liss, yeah, I've talked with Nate Liss a few different times about different things on Twitter and stuff. Seems like a solid guy to have a conversation with. I enjoyed it. No, I'm not, but I know Jack Daniel's Green Label. But it's a cheaper brand whiskey, which usually is like what people drink when they have no money. They count out change to buy it. But there's one particular brand that's a Green Label, which is like specifically there was a big story about it, specifically actually a bourbon, so it's made in Kentucky, and it's like not, you can't count change out to buy it, and it's actually a decent whiskey. It's meant to like discount Jack Daniel's or as good as Jack Daniel's. I tried it and it wasn't far off, but it was nowhere near as good as Jack Daniel's, which is made in Tennessee, so not a bourbon, to be fair. But I remember it. You have to ask me another time though. I'm gonna have to Google it or go to a liquor store to look at the bottle. I'd have to see the bottles. Hey Joe, I appreciate it. I think this show is the peanut gallery. I'm hoping that's what we're kind of making here. As much as it has a direction, I just want this to be the peanut gallery. You know, Ray is my favorite. Ray's awesome. I know he's got a persona of his own, but he's a genuine guy. I've again lucky enough to podcast with him once or twice. I've talked to him in DMs. Content version of yourself is somewhat of a rounded, like a polished. If you were you times 10, or you want you not perfected but heightened. But he's genuine as well. Like genuine guy, nice guy, good guy. And it's as much, again, I'm not friend. I don't know intimate details about Ray GQ either. I just talked to him a couple of times from my experience behind the scenes, a little experience. Like there are some people I haven't met behind the scenes at all, like a lot. And I would like hearing that. Seems like he's pretty genuine. You always hate those stories where a celebrity that you like turns out to be a jerk in real life. Like that, I always fear that when I like someone, like don't meet your heroes kind of stuff. So I like to point it out. Like I met Ray GQ a little bit, talked to him. He's not that jerk behind the scenes. Genuine guy, seriously. So Zach, so's J Mike, so's JJ Zacharyson. Like not a jerk behind the scenes. A small glimpse that I've had on these famous people, That's genuine. They're genuinely those people. They're nice people, not jerks behind the scenes. And I would like knowing that if I didn't. So that's why I'm mentioning it. And the other day, the Mason guy said he's never had a fantasy team make the playoffs out of 1,000 teams. Well, that would suck. Especially the playoffs. I mean, it depends on league format, but I can't imagine not being able to make the playoffs. I have, like, on rosters that have completely gutted, maybe, but the playoffs are fairly easy to get. That might be exaggerated, because in my leagues there are often 3 or 4 teams actively trying to tank because they're very active leagues. So, but playoffs should be possible to make, you'd think. Mike Me Up got me started into all of this. He's a wealth of knowledge. Mike's a genuine guy too. But I don't think we've podcasted. It feels like I met him once, like in this kind of video format. I don't know, but I've definitely seen some of his tweets, and he's in a group chat with me once, or he was at once. Yeah, wealth of knowledge, and just wants to help people, wants to get better at fantasy as well. I like him. Probably. Eric, I think that's a full stop on most things. Again, 90% of this is honestly entertainment. Football, sport is entertainment. If you enjoy it, it's fine. It sounds like a joke, Joe, but also honesty. I'm actually reading a lot of Terry Pratchett right now. The Moist Van Lipwig series, the ones where the con man is getting put in charge of a lot of different businesses to improve them by the tyrant of the city. I don't know, it's a fun storyline. I'm actually enjoying them quite a lot. But where he's a con man, he's got these little sayings about himself, and one of them is, if you tell people the truth, but the truth is, I can't remember how he says it because I'm not Terry Pratchett, obviously. But essentially, if you tell people a truth that sounds like something you should lie about, people are thinking you're joking. I think that's a fun self-defense mechanism. Potentially that, but I think it would be really hard not to get in the playoffs if you had 1,000 attempts. Like, you should get there by plum chance and variance. You should make the playoffs in one of those. Anyone during someone shared with me the BDG, the Big Dogs Gotta Eat, the YouTube channel with Nick and everyone since we're also streaming on the YouTube, you probably know about them. They're starting this huge, 1,200 person league. Anyone planning on joining it? Slightly more high stakes than I would like. It's doing it through NFTs and stuff. And I think over 3 years, the entry fee will ultimately end up being 350 or 3 to 3. I don't understand NFTs, but you have to buy an NFT to get into it. Sounded like an interesting idea. Since I was here, thought I'd ask. Just talking of other leagues and high stakes players, I'm not entirely sure who Mason is. That's why I'm kind of not commenting here. Volume is, and some advice I got on YouTube, by the way, to this comment, Todd. I don't know, actually, I've skipped enough. I don't know what it's about, but someone said it's not so much about, podcasts are about a schedule, producing regularly scheduled content so people know it's there when they're ready to listen to it for their morning commute or whatever they plan to listen to it. YouTube is much more about not so much scheduled content, but a volume of content. So, for a podcast, it's better to have, if you have 10 recorded, it's better to release one every week at the exact same time. Whereas on YouTube, if you have 10 recorded, just upload them. It's more about the volume than the regularly scheduled programming. And I thought that was an interesting observation. I don't know how true it is, but it was an interesting, apparently, the way YouTube works different than podcasting. I think most people blur those lines, though, Joe. I'm trying to create content and entertainment, but I'm very much on the trying to improve fantasy, my game, and hopefully at some point someone else's. I think everyone's a little bit of all of that. Is this a Mason guy that I don't know whose channel skyrocketed? Someone else I gotta learn from? I know Mike. It's the last name that I actually recognize when you said it. I don't know YouTube creators as much as I know general general creators, the ones that are on websites and PFF, and I know the BDGE website a little bit because again, one of my patrons was um watching their channel and mentioned them to me, so I went and sought them out and said hello, and that's how I met Mike and also Nick a little bit, a little bit. Yeah, I don't understand the algorithms, to be honest. A little bit. It looks like I'm gonna have to study it if I want to get any further with YouTube, but it's definitely not my thing. It's not even about the barrier to entry with money, as we've talked about with gambling in general. It just gives me an icky feeling. I think competing with your friends and trying to predict the future and ultimately or it being a feudal, I find it fun. That's why I play. That's a weird part about things like BMI. It literally changes if they eat a little bit more, but we talk about it as aesthetic. It can't possibly be helpful, but it makes a compelling argument. Yeah, most people I know just roll the money back into the leagues. In my small stakes friend leagues, and most of us are like, yeah, they use it to pay their entry fees or whatever. Again, I'm going to dynasty outhouse most of this stuff. If you enjoy playing for money, do what you enjoy. If you enjoy playing to win or just to have fun with your friend, do it for that reason. Like, I don't fun shame y'all. You can have whatever fun you want as long as it's legal and doesn't hurt anyone else, obviously. I think I know what you mean here. Like even the title of it, when my patron told me "Big Dogs Gotta Eat," I was like, "That's not my speed." But that's how I met Mike, and Mike is exactly my speed. And much smarter. Like he's analytics driven. He's smart. He wants to get better. He continues to try to update his process. He wants to He trust but verify is very much Mike as well. And Nick seems he's been very helpful. The few messages I sent to him. He seems very busy though. Sometimes you don't hear back, but he's looks very busy with that channel, so that's understandable. But again, it's like the bombastic nature. I can see the value of it. I can appreciate it, but it's not my. I think that's a good way of saying it. It's not like it's my speed. But you considered it, Joe? Yeah, and again, where you play slightly, well, significantly, but not many, like you said earlier, higher stakes than me. I thought maybe you considered it. I guess if you're more into the crypto space, would be the people that were interested. Meant to be a huge league, though. Hey, Lingen? How you all doing? Been all over YouTube lately for Dynasty content since my league switched over a couple years ago. It's fun. Oh, glad to have you. Yeah, it's nice to get for a second you get to believe you're smart because you get something right, but then you're going to get something wrong and that's going to take you down. Like I find it a good idea not to attach any personal feeling like your sense of self-worth or intelligence to fantasy football. And that was a strong motivation for me earlier. Like I want to get smart. I want to prove that I can learn this and get good. And that will mean there are no grades anymore. So I have to be smart some other way. And increasingly, especially as you see people fail and other people call other people idiots for taking a very reasonable bet and it not working out or taking that guy. And more and more have backed out any connection between you don't want to connect what you think of anything about yourself in fantasy football. It is for fun. I mean, some people are playing for money, so play for money by all means, but try and back out your own opinions on yourself from it. I started out that way, and I find it better to back them out in real terms. So I've never had a home league because obviously for various different reasons I got into it a different way. It sounds like a nice idea. I never had a live draft. Like to do that too. Well, you're allowed to say that because they're your friends, I guess. It's the fun part about friendship, right? Yeah, I don't BDGE too much. Yeah, very popular. I assume they make good content. I did like it's the kind of thing I noticed. Like Nick's got that part of his channel which is behind the business of which is a weird concept in general. Again, as we become more industry, it has more relevance. But yeah, it's one of those little things where they might talk like not my speed. The big dog's got to eat alpha males. Brr, brr, brr. That was a really delicately interesting space to notice. You know, there's intelligence behind that move to have like a behind the how you do podcast, how you become popular at podcasting. And then he got Matt Kelly on. He gets big names on to talk about not fantasy, but how they grew in fantasy. It's a really like no one was doing that. It's a niche space that he noticed and launched and just went for because he tends to do that. And I kind of respect that too. Again, it's not my speed, but it's clear that despite the energy of it, it's not, and despite like the bombacity of Matt Kelly, you can not like it, and it seems like it's from a place that isn't smart, but there are some things, some parts of it you're like, yeah, there's a working mind going on there. That guy's good at this. Like that was a smart space to occupy before anyone else, especially on YouTube. Like he made himself big on YouTube when most of us were fighting over our Twitter followers. You know, that was a smart move. And he was on TikTok before most other people. You shrewd. It's not like I made a study of him. I just noticed. It's interesting, like the fantasy space. I think we think of ourselves as an old elderly dad space, but I mean, me, Cash and Connor in my Discord all the time. He comes here on this chat. He's Connor LaPlante, worth a follow, by the way. But they're both like half my age. It's a younger. There's a large section of our community that is younger than we think of ourselves of, and it's probably where a lot of growth is coming from. You know, as kids age into being interested in sports and this sport and playing fantasy because they're not the jocks, where is how a lot of us got interested in these kind of games. And no, it's interesting. I don't know how much of our space is divided between the youth and the elderly, like me. Um, maybe it's becoming a younger game. No one's. I'm not looking. I'm not looking at audience kind of participation, but that might be why he angled him. Again, he's made enough smart, clearly shrewd business moves. Maybe that's why he's using that and angling it towards young people. I mean, YouTube, social media, heavily a younger space. So whether the fantasy community is or not, probably a smart angle to take. It's again just not my speed. Marketing, yeah. I, I mean that he's implementing like crypto or other grown spaces, their playbook in the fantasy space, which again is kind of shrewd. Like I saw them sell a lifestyle more than actual products when it came to Instagram. They did that for decades, right? Well, not decades, but they did it for so long, and so many people became a brand for the first time through doing that. But no one really did that in the fantasy space. And now you're starting it's talking about created content creators. You're seeing people intentionally trying to use some of those playbooks in our space. And not my speed, and I think that's pretty obvious. I mean, but it's not like it's not smart. You don't see why that would be a good way of like I'd love to make this a living, you know? It's not my speed is just stupid when it comes to yeah, but you could stop doing all those jobs that you don't want to do and you could do this. So how is that not smart? How is that smart to say not my speed? I don't know. I just I find it difficult not to be me. But I don't think I can recognize it at least. That's the best I get. What he's trying to do. Yeah, yeah. And you're right. That's a perfect way of selling it, is selling fantasy as a lifestyle. You're selling the lifestyle. We've done that with other products and other communities to turn them into industries and turn them into. I mean, the razor blades have been doing it lately, for goodness sake. Like shaving is a lifestyle now instead of a product, and you pick Bic or you pick Gillette. It's now a lifestyle. And yeah, not my speed, but I think it's fairly shrewd play since no one else was doing it. I keep hoping the community veers away from heavy analytics content. It gets so boring, even if it's useful. And that's fair. I mean, it's what I like to do because it's where I think I can actually add value or find something that will help me. But I will say this: the dynasty space is 90% analytics guys. We talk like we're the minority in the dynasty space as well. I really don't think so. Like, how many Rage EQs are there? I think that's one of the reasons that he did find such immediate success, because there's actually relatively few full on film guys. We think of it as a film space with some nerds, but it's more a nerd place where we talk about the film guy sport. And there's actually relatively few good, honest, genuine, can do the content game well film guys. There's Matt Wallman. There's some hybrids that do both. There's Ray GQ. I like Zach, but he's busy being an engineer and a dad most of the time. I mean, there's who declares himself film guy, you know? There's hybrids, there's nerds, and then there's just a couple, I'm about the film, that are actually good, that are able to do it without thinking they have to be dismissive of analytics to be a film guy. So therefore put your back up straight away, since most of the audience is used and most of the creators are analytics guys. There's just an energy that's not going to work a lot probably. But yeah, I think it's a good point. We're mostly analytics guys, but we think about I think we think about the space the other way around. It's oversaturated with nerds, but we think of ourselves as a minority. Because to be fair, there's a reason, I think. Like, analytics generally doesn't dismiss film, but we get talked about on TV like we're dismissible. The tone isn't even on both sides, and I think that's why we get to think of ourselves as the underdogs, the small guys. But really, we're the majority of the space. I think that's a good point. Why are Eckler and Fournette so far in value? Good question. Fournette shouldn't be drafted that low this year, even in Dynasty. And Eckler is because he feels younger, honestly. That's why. I could try and make up a better excuse, but we think Eckler is earlier on his career because we've been hearing about Fournette for longer. He's changed teams. He's on team. He's on old man Brady's team. Yeah, this is probably the last year they're significant bets for points, both of them. Eckler's a good 2022 bet, so is Fournette. If you could sell Eckler for Fournette plus, great dynasty move. That's a good point, Brandon. I don't think I framed Eckler in that light. I tell you what, who does? It just occurred to me when you said that. Jeff Bell from Fantasy Pros. He's big on Eckler, and I think he's made the same point that he's older than people think. But yeah, that's a really good. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're exactly right. Maybe we think he can only have a good season after a bad season, perhaps. But I think just saying it out loud, you can probably not right, even if that's why. If I created content, it would be openly about my fact-based opinions that strictly fact. I mean, you know, there is nothing that is strictly fact. Numbers don't lie, but they can't be looked at without being observed, and therefore they're immediately subjective. You know what I mean? It's like Eckler. We think of him as younger, he's the same age. And sometimes you literally just don't run that across your brain the right way. And also, I mean, the other reason is the group is so good that if you just stick with the group and only have a few outlandish sanding takes, you're gonna be pretty good. As long as you're long as you're pretty close to what the group think, and what ADP suggests, it actually hits pretty hard. ADP versus any one person, ADP probably wins over a 3-year period easily, actually. Might lose an individual year badly, but it wins a consensus 3 years versus any one person handily, over a 3-year. Like, if we had 3 years to compete against ADP, you versus ADP, the person, no matter who it is probably gonna lose badly on average over the 3 years, even if ADP loses drastically in one of those years. At what point did you leave Jacoby Myers for Kendrick Bourne? Um, I don't think I left. I wanted to keep my end in, as it were, on Jacoby Myers because what he did seemed like a pretty likely outcome. I thought he would get the touchdowns if he did it, though, which is where Bourne still got to happen anyway. And I haven't left Jacoby Myers. There's actually positive signal there too. But again, it's kind of the once you've seen him with the role and the result, you expect change or to someone else, or you expect to continue. And it actually happened mid last off season because I've liked Kendrick Bourne for a while. He's overperformed expectation based on his ADP for a few years now. Like, people think replaceability at wide receiver, especially in a bomb role, is more given, and it's not. Like, especially where his draft capital is to keep getting jobs and target share on multiple teams. Like, he's better than fantasy will ever have to think about him as. So I'd noticed him and Pascal for the same reason a couple of years ago, actually. And then with the growing hype of Myers, because Cooper got on Myers, that's why. And Cooper makes everything so popular because he's, again, so good and so funny and good at this that everyone believes him when he says something, that Myers just quantum leaped Bourne in value. And so it started to become relevant to point out that Bourne wasn't too far behind him in terms of positive signal and was free in comparison at that point. So the liking Bourne on the Patriots actually started mid last off season because Cooper made it, and he's right to, but everyone believed it because Cooper's saying it so much that it became a good idea to consider Kendrick Bourne. No. Kid Coop, Paris Campbell is finally going to break out this year. Remember this moment, Peter. He's not. But honestly, I respect all truthers, especially if you're able to hold on. It's so hard to do. I wish you well. I hope it works out for you. I don't think it's very likely. Then again, I didn't even like him as a rookie, so I would say that. Just a hater. Dismiss me. Prognostication, prediction is my superpower. That's nice. It's not mine. Way too impatient. No, no, no. You left him, Peter. Did I? Fair enough. I left him for Bourne, and I got 3 touchdown games. So I'll take it. There you go. Tell me how Traylon Burks isn't the next N'Keal Harry. Go ahead, do it. Again, this is one of the most questions are. I don't see how you compare them. N'Keal Harry was a bust. I still can't find a lot of reason in my process that would have suggested, because I tried to go for things that are true before, during, after. I was still using market share too much at the time N'Keal Harry was drafted, and yards per team pass attempt do put them in slightly different categories. So I'm hoping that has weeded out some of the difficulties or some of the reasons that N'Keal Harry looked like a much better prospect than he was. But honestly, their production doesn't compare particularly well through yards per team pass attempts adjusted by age particularly well. Again, N'Keal Harry was largely boosted up because of my preference for market share at the time. Well, let's see. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Again, we make a lot of mistakes while making assumptions. So why don't I go? Where is it? I need the static one. I'm not going to do this on the live database. I'd close down the stream. It's so big at this point. I got too many things running right now. Let's see. Yeah, Traylon Burks broke out at a later age. N'Keal Harry broke out at 18, so he's not the breakout age star that Harry was. That immediately makes him different, since that's one of the things that I really liked about Harry at the time. Again, it's how I learned the differences of how breakout age isn't all that it was cracked up to be, as I cracked it up to be in some cases. Live and learn. We try and do better. Where's your team pass attempt? Played 6 games. Yeah, there you go. At age 19, Nikhil Harry was running at a 2.7 yards per team pass attempt basis. Again, he performed better young, but that was Traylon Burks' rookie year. When you look at the height of their powers, Traylon Burks is running at a 3.9, and Nikhil Harry is running at a 3.0 at age 20. So he's doing it younger, but adjusted for his career path and also age adjusting it as well. Traylon Burks was doing better on a year-to-year basis. Again, to be clear, it's not like I know why Harry busted. Harry still looks like a really decent prospect, even though we know the result. He's in the 91st percentile of my pre-draft model, so just production. And now that I've converted to yards per team pass attempt, that's still too high. He is a bust. I was wrong. But Traylon Burks across the same model is a 99th percentile prospect. They compare, but like I wouldn't see any direct comparisons. Especially since one's a older player, he's not an early breakout. Like the way I profiled doesn't bring them up in two comparisons. And apart from that, I'll agree both of them have landing spots I don't understand. I don't know why either team went for them. I don't know why Harry fell, since I still can't explain why he busted, to be fair. Where did Burks go in the end? I've forgotten. It's Arizona is where Harry played. Arkansas is where Burks played. Oh yeah, he went to replace AJ Brown, even though he's not AJ Brown. I guess that makes more sense on the New England destination. Um, I'd have to borrow from other people's description of how they play to actually explain why I think their landing spots are different. But in terms of how I look at college profiles, even though Harry is a significantly high prospect, he would have ranked fifth overall in my pre-draft model for that year. Burks ranks first and is in a higher percentile of the model in general. So it's not like they don't compare, but I don't look at players that way. Maybe. Um, Christian Watson's a bust. I don't understand why people just went out on Burks. I don't. To me, like Drake London has all the metrics as well. He's second overall for me, I think, at wide receiver. But his path, when I consider how he plays or how he played, not in a model, so this is just my opinion on the way they created their production, looks like a much narrower path to me. Like this, be Mike Evans or fail. And most of the write-ups I've read about Drake London, which have not comforted me, have been about how he can play entirely differently and therefore exceed. So it's like they know that, but they're prophesizing something that I don't even like. He's going to suddenly play like a different player, and his skill set will like. It seems like it's based on a lot of if. Having said that, his metrics are there. The few metrics I use, yards per team pass attempt over age production. So I can't disagree, but that's the bust that I'm worried about, to be honest. Olave Wilson, I think the floors are pretty safe. They're both experienced and very talented at a high volume role on teams that are valuing them. They seem pretty safe with likely less upside. So Burks and London seem the potential bust for ceiling candidates, and I'm more worried about London. And Watson, I don't know. Once you're at the end of the first round, those players are more likely bust candidates as they are. Like again, rookie hit rate ADP is not great, but I think it's fine. Like I'm not concerned about Burks. A lot of people are, so I think it's fair. I'm not saying you're wrong. Just trying to explain why I think about it differently. I think all 22 rookies are going to feel somewhat disappointing this year at wide receiver. Burst is not a typo. Okay. Apologize. Why were people buying all the Rams weapons when Stafford joined the team, but when AJ joined the Eagles, all of the Eagles were sells, including AJ Brown? Not a clean comparison. I mean, Stafford elevates the receiving options in Uh, Los Angeles? Yeah. AJ Brown can't directly elevate the expectation for the receiver. Like he's not the one throwing the ball. I think he should elevate the team, but he also caps some of the ceiling of the other Eagles receivers. Like that's the thing. Good players help out other good players on the team, but you also know you can't Calvin Johnson. There's only one Calvin Johnson per team. There's only one Jarvis Landry per team. However, they are the highest scoring wide receivers. There's only one of them, and sometimes they can tandem it. That's the thing. Like Cup and Woods were both good on the Rams, but Cup had a historic season without Woods and with Stafford. Like there's a higher ceiling if you don't share quite as much high level company. Both things can be true. You know what I mean? Um, so I think that's ultimately one question I did have is why aren't people immediately elevating? And to be fair, both Woods and Cup were still being drafted at wide receiver 30s that year. We talked a big game, but we weren't drafting them nearly high enough considering the expectation. And the same is true with Denver this year. It's the same thing. And we're doing the same thing. We're talking up their receivers, but both are still drafted at or outside the top 20. Like it doesn't add up. It, we need we need to bet on our rostership, right? The thing I'm trying to do better at Dynasty. And Wilson going to Denver should be considered similar to Stafford. Going to the Rams. Laquan Treadwell, he was even worse. Like Laquan Treadwell was the one everyone liked that year that I said was gonna bust, very likely a bust. Don't understand why people like him. Then he busted, especially when he went to Minnesota. Like, how much do we hate lower drafted players not to know with a certainty that Diggs and Thielen were going to kick that guy's ass for targets, not physically? I'm sure they're all very good teammates together. Like night and day in terms of ability in college, even at different levels. And again, Burks may well be a bust this year, but Treadwell profiled poorly, not just worse, like Harry does to Burks. Treadwell just poorly, especially as a first round pick. Just pick a bus. And Burks could, but again, the reason the people still on my bus list are ones I don't know the reason for. And there's just that variance in rookie evaluation. Some like Harry. I still would draft him really high if I didn't know the future in his rookie class. I think I get it more accurately within that rookie class and than I did at the time because of market share, but I still think I would have expected him to be good. I not I don't know. I literally don't have all the answers. Part of rookie evaluation is accepting it's about risk tolerance. Most rookies miss. 2 to 3 are good by the end of the first 3 years. This is considered a deeper experience, not a high level hit class, even by the NFL. Those they took shots on for those high level hits were Traylon Burks, Drake London, and I think it's pretty clear they're expecting something out of who's the other guy? Jameis Williams and George Pickens, based on the concerns they had and where they were taking the NFL draft. The rest are kind of safe, decent prospect picks, and that's good. Gavin Wilson is a guy in this draft. Yes, he is. Again, who's also pretty good in college. I have him next, like everyone else, neck and neck with Olave. Elena Olave, just because I don't think the concerns make as much sense on him. Like he played an extra year, therefore he's worse, but he performed relatively well as Wilson for the first 3 years. So I don't know. Seems like hoping variance when goat swings in your favor. Goff made the players for the Rams, though. His ADP was decent before the Stafford trade. Yeah, because we thought there's a balance between receiver and quarterback, right? And if your quarterback is down here, your wide receivers have to be up here for both to be significant producers. But if you elevate the quarterback play and you still have good wide receivers, that's why Stafford should have improved the ADP of Cup and um, Woods. But in fact, they were both still drafted in the 30s, and most made the wrong bet. If they were making a bet, they would stump for Woods when Cup was the one who proved to have a higher ceiling back when with Goff. Um, Same things happen with Denver. Everyone loves Denver and Sutton and Judy, but despite the fact they've been performing down here, they weren't even as good as Cup of Woods. But with low-level QB play, Wilson arriving should elevate everyone. And instead, they're being drafted at or below where they were last year. We should have risen on them, and we haven't. That's why I'm comparing the two. And since Wilson directly elevates everyone's expectation in that office, I think that's fair to say. Since we've seen so few of these moves in prime, it's hard to know for sure. This year, we're going to have a lot more data on it. I think that's fair. Sorry about my puppeteering. Sometimes I think clearer with a physical way to look at it. He should. Stafford clearly is a different kind of cat. Like, that's the thing. We thought Stafford was good. We thought Wilson was elite and just held back by the system. So why hasn't there been a bigger effect on like I don't think we eat our own product sometimes. Bake our own cookies, drink our own milk. I don't know. Crazy. I just trade Fant and a 223 thirds for an early to mid 23 second. Wow. I mean, I trade Fant for the second. It's weird that you have to add the 2/3, but yeah, I think Fant's a top 12 tight end, which isn't particularly exciting. So, what are your thoughts on Traylon Burks? I imagine this question came in after I was talked about him for a while. He's my wide receiver one this draft class. Does heavy bust potential all over the 22 class as well. And I actually feel an inclination to trade down into safer players like Olave and Wilson and David Bell, partly safer because they're cheaperness, but also just because their skill set and the way they were drafted into the NFL, it feels like there's a more secure floor there. But he has the best profile across the way that the age-adjusted yards per team pass attempt that I use to rank players, plus draft capital after the draft, and Traylon Burks comes out as wide receiver one. There's heavy bust potential this year, but that's where I have him. I'm drafting him in best ball leagues because my expectation of the highest drafted wide receivers in the draft class should have at least second half points per game advantage in the rookie season. Even if they won't finish inside the top 24, there's a per game value in rookies. Tall height, jumbo height, and lack of separation are all things I never draft in wide receivers. I know that might be a good list. Again, I don't know. We could ask Zach when he's back. He likes Traylon Burks a lot though, as well a lot. That was a bad sentence. So I imagine he disagrees with the list or how well he fits on that list, but I can't evaluate him, man. It's not what I know. I just don't see how his value can decrease by the start of next year. People will evaluate him just by having a different quarterback. Who are we talking about here, Brandon? London, that is. That's fair. Again, he's more. I think he should be the second drafted wide receiver this year. That is not meant to be shade. I'm scared of the 22 class. These are the two drafted to have upside by the NFL very clearly. That means there's more bust risk. If it's a smaller target hit, there's less chance you hit it. Just simple the way it works in my head. Um, and that's fair. Neither of these players have to do Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase type things to remain or elevate in value. To be clear, he needs 400 yards. He needs 600 yards. Easy for a player like that. Um, so it's a value conversation, right? Like I'm drafting him as a second wide receiver overall this year. I'm heavily favoring wide receivers over every running back except for Brees Hall, even though I'm expecting running back breakouts this year. So it's not like I'm saying undervalue Drake London. Um, would I trade him for a 20 to 23 first, though? Straight up, any first? Yes. Because I think there's more less potential. Would I rather have Devontae Smith? Yeah. Elijah Moore? Yeah. I'll take that floor, and they're still young wide receivers. Yep. So I'm not saying he's going to be bad. I expect him to burst. I'm more concerned about it. So I'll take safer, similar valued assets, especially if you're going young, proven wide receiver. I mean, there's not a lot of, you've got a safer floor, even if there's less upside. But it's again, London, if he hits, is going to be big. Be clear. That's true, Brandon. I don't get the prospect hype for Burks. Again, guys, I think if you're saying why are people high on Traylon Burks, I think that's a little disingenuous if you look at what's actually happening. Traylon Burks has consistently fallen after the draft, both in ADP, best ball, dynasty. There have been negative reports about his asthma. I think he's the one falling. He's not the one being increased in value. But again, your links may differ. A good QB will increase the size of the pie much more than a good wide receiver will. I think that's a fair statement. I think expecting either to increase the pie itself rather than increase the value of the I think more about it as in terms of I don't expect 20 more passing attempts per game or 5 more passing attempts a game. Instead, I think those passes are more likely to be completed. They're more likely to visit the red zone because of that. And so there's going to be more touchdown and more yards per game that wide receivers are catching. So I think about it more in terms of the efficiency of the offense and the size of it. I mean, Tom Brady doesn't mean that you have exponentially more passing attempts than Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles was probably passing more often a game. There's a balance in that too, because they were losing. Okay, I think we've got a few comments here. I'm gonna have to delete. It's like 2 in the morning, so I'm gonna have to get out of here. Look over there. I don't think I will. Burks is yeah, I think it's fine. I'm scared of this rookie class in general, which makes it sound like I'm talking them down. I understand. I'm a nerve. Look at me. I'm a weak little nerd. I'm just nervous. But I'm going to say he's a wide receiver one because I think that's what's going to happen. And that way I can look back and say, see, I was nervous if you buzz. Or see, I said he was wide receiver. Honestly, that's how I'm playing the 2022 class. I'm going to value knife. And if it tips towards value, I'm all out. And if it tips towards he's a value, I'll just continue to stay on this knife of being nervous, but I'll take Burks. If you're trading him for less than he's worth, I'll take Burks. Same with London. I'm playing the value game very strongly. I don't want to lose, but I don't want to go all in, which is unfortunate because if I felt willing to, again, Burks is falling in value. Chase fell in value before the season started. There's a similar path there, but he's not Jamar Chase. That's the thing. Did they? Burks and one like Wandale was like a running back for 2 years in Nebraska, though. Do you mean like in his 3rd year when he finally got to an FSB conference, CFB conference, they were playing a similar game? Wait, I'd be interested in your answer, but it it's not like it doesn't factor in because it doesn't matter. I don't know how to value it, but I really enjoy hearing what other people again, I try to value it in that second half of the process, which is what's made me nervous about London, to be honest. Um People that do evaluate skill sets say that London's skill set is in college, the way he played doesn't translate very well or very often to the NFL, which is why they often rely on the idea that he can diversify the way he plays the position in the NFL. But that seems, again, a lot of ifs. But I didn't move him down my ranks because of that. I just flatly state I'm a little more nervous, and because of notes like that, it makes me nervous about the upside of the 2022 class. I don't think I know where the hits are as securely as I normally do, so I play that value now. I have Hawkinson and now 8 picks in the top 16. Wow, in the 23 draft. So you should be good after the 23 class. Dynasty begins, kind of a thing. It was kind of to reassure I get another tight end in the third. That's fair enough. You should definitely get a tight end with the first 16 pick. No, London. Oh, okay. Sorry. I will tell him anything you tell me to, Joe. Tell me what to do, and I will do it. All right, guys. I should get out of here because I can only make up for my own failings so much, in one night. Next week we're back on at 9:30. Promise I won't be called into emergency at work just before the show starts next week. And that Zach and all Outhouse will probably be able to make it. I can't actually promise they'll be here since they get to decide that, but hopefully they'll be able to make it. They'll be able to forgive me too, and they'll come back to the Dynasty Grind. In the meantime, I'm gonna get out of here because I got to get sleep and go to work for my. They stole the one little bit of time. I'm kidding. I don't have Zach here, so it's going to be harder, but I'm going to fake having Zach here. I really appreciate everyone. Thanks for sticking with me and coming back after I was late. If you did, means a lot to me. And so do my Wednesdays. It really sucks that I screwed this one up. But I appreciate it. I really do. For now, we're going to do the whole look behind you thing, and then I'm going to leave. But know that I don't want to. And I wish Zach and Russ was here, especially. But thank you. My fault. I apologize. Look over there. Bye, guys. Bye.